Noah, the first story. Biblical deluge stories are not original. The Hebrew authors of the Bible are credited for discovering and deciphering the 11th tablet of the Sumerian Epic of Gilgamesh by the British Museum's George Smith. The Babylonian deluge myth originates from Sumerian mythology. Arno Pobel published a fragment comprising the lower third of a 6-column Sumerian tablet in the Nippur collection of the University Museum in 1914. Its contents are primarily devoted to the story of the flood. Although scholars have been looking for additional deluge tablets, no further fragment has been found in any museum, private collection or excavation. Even though Pobel is our sole source, the translation he prepared is still rudimentary and standard. A lone tablet containing the contents of a flood episode is notable, not just because of that episode, but also because it is primarily about flooding. The same holds for the passages preceding and introducing the deluge's story. These passages impact Sumerian cosmology. These texts contain several telling statements concerning the creation of man, the origin of kingship, and the existence of at least 5 prehistoric cities. The following is practically the entire extant text of the myth, with its tantalizing obscurities and uncertainties. Cuneiformists face many challenges and are in for several surprises in the future. No date can be given for the appearance of myths. There is a break of about 37 lines in the lower third of the preserved tablet. A deity then addresses other deities. He is probably declaring that he will save humanity from extinction, and that, as a result, man will construct the cities and temples of the gods. The address is followed by 3 lines that describe the deity's actions to make his words effective, but are hard to relate to the context. 4 more lines follow, beginning with the creation of man, animals, and plants.
And Sumerians.
Overall, it reads like this: I will destroy my humankind in its destruction. I will return there to Nentu by my creatures. I will return the people to their homes. They will build the divine laws, and I will comfort them with my shade. Their bricks will be laid in pure places for our houses. Places of purity will be the places of our decisions. There was a pure fire quenching the water. Rituals were perfected, and divine laws were exalted. He accomplished this on earth. He put the law in place. Then, the earth sprouted lush vegetation. After Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursag fashioned the black-headed people. Creatures with 4 legs of the plain were created creatively. Approximately 37 lines later, we learn that the kingship was lowered from heaven and 5 cities were established. Following the throne of kingship were lowered from heaven. After the exalted tiara and throne of kingship were lowered from heaven.
Bro, it's like 3 a.m. there, bro.
And the exalted divine laws, establishing 5 pure cities. They were referred to as cult centers and given names. He gave Eridu, the first of these cities, to Nudimmud, the leader, and Bad-Tabira, the second. He gave the third, Larak, to Ender-Bilasag. Flood, Ark, and Sumerian Noah. The only document of this myth is Arno Pobel's handwritten copy of the flood tablet in the University Museum. The 4th, Sipar, gave the hero Utu. The 5th, Sharupak, he gave to Sur. Once he named these cities, he assigned them as cult centers. Then he brought, established the cleaning of small rivers program. After a break of about 37 lines, the gods decide to bring the flood and destroy humankind. Some gods are unhappy over the cruel decision when the text becomes understandable again. The counterpart to Noah in the Bible is Ziu-Sudra. He is a pious, God-fearing king who constantly seeks divine revelations through dreams and incantations. Ziu-Sudra appears to station himself by a wall, where he hears the voice of a deity communicating the decision taken by the gods to send a flood and to destroy the seed of humanity. The most extensive part of this passage reads, during the flood, Nintu wept like a baby. Pure Inanna penned a lament for its people. Enki consulted with himself. Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursag. Heaven and earth uttered the names of An and Enlil. Then Ziu-Sudra, king of Pashishu, did. Giant-sized construction. He acted with humility, obedience, and reverence. Constantly attending, he brought forth all kinds of dreams. He uttered the names of heaven and earth. The gods built a wall. Standing by its side, Ziu-Sudra listened. Stand by my left wall. Take my word and listen to my instructions by the wall. Because of our efforts, a flood will sweep over the cult centers to destroy the seed of humanity. This is the decision, the word of the gods. Enlil and An obeyed the command. its kingship and rule will end. Ziusudra must have received detailed instructions in the text about building a giant boat to save himself from destruction. Sadly, this is missing because of another 40-line break. Upon rereading the text, we find the flood had already raged in all its violence over the land for 7 days and nights. As the sun god Utu returns, bringing his precious light everywhere, Ziusudra prostrates himself before him and offers sacrifices. Read the lines below. Violent windstorms and floods swept over the cult centers. After the flood had swept the land for 7 days and 7 nights. Storms on the mighty waters had tossed the boat about. He shed light on heaven and earth. Ziusudra opened a window to the vast boat. As a gift, Atu brought his rays into the giant boat. King Ziusudra protested before Utu. The king slaughters a sheep and an ox. Again, there is a break of about 39 lines here. The last lines of our text describe Ziusudra's deification. He was given eternal life when he prostrated himself to An and Enlil and was transferred to Dilmun, the city where the sun rises. Anu and Enlil uttered breath of heaven, and breath of heaven, the breath stretched. From the earth, vegetation rises. The king Ziusudra, he protested before An and Enlil. Ziusudra was cherished by An and Enlil. It gives him a lifelike appearance. The god they bring down for him will breathe forever. Afterward, Ziusudra the king, the keeper of the names of vegetation and the seeds of humankind. They caused to dwell in the land of crossing, the land of Dilmun, the place where the sun rises. We do not understand what happened to the transfigured Ziusudra in the home of the immortals, since the rest of the tablet, containing about 39 lines of text, is destroyed. We now turn to Hades, from paradise to the mighty below, or as the Sumerians referred to it, the land of no return. This descent to the netherworld is one of the best preserved Sumerian myths. A restless goddess descends to the land of the dead to satisfy her unbridled ambitions. This provides a rare parallel with one of the most significant New Testament themes. In recent years, many historical and scriptural findings have been revealed that were not included or misrepresented in the canonical Bible. When historical texts like the Book of Enoch, Nag Hammadi Gospels, and the Book of Jubilees are synthesized and correlated with existing documents, they provide a profound understanding of the beliefs shared in modern Western culture. Our knowledge of Middle Eastern history is enriched by ancient writings, not part of the canonical Bible. This has had a powerful effect on Western thought. In the deserted plains of Mesopotamia lie hidden scrolls hidden in remote caves. Cuneiform tablets covered by the sands of time, and monuments aligned perfectly to the solstice and equinox. Documents from this period predate the canonical Bible for thousands of years. The story's origins and influences are exposed here. It is surprising to learn that Noah lived in Shuruppak, the Sumerian capital of the city of Noah. He was reasonably well educated in his account of the period he lived. The king of Uruk visits Noah in the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the longest known stories involving the king of Uruk. During the conversation, he discusses some matters that concern both of them. Sumer is a land between two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, at the southern end of Mesopotamia. Abraham was born there. Once the covenant was made between Abraham and the Lord, he became Abraham. He had been called Abram before that. The Lord told Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 4, "The time is near for you to become the father of many nations." Genesis, "Follow me to the Anunnaki land. Leave your Anunnaki country, your people, and your father's household. I will show you. You will become a prosperous nation, and I will bless you. Your name will become famous, and you will be blessed. Those who help you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be cursed, and all Anunnaki on earth will be blessed through you." When the Lord called Abram to go to the land of Canaan, he was in the Sumerian city of Haran. Abram was born approximately 1433 BCE in the Sumerian city of Ur. Terah, his father, was an artisan and a priest in the local temple. His brothers Nahor and Haran also lived there. Abraham is preparing to leave for Canaan when he is in the city of Haran. "The Lord brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land." Isn't the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob also the God of the Israelites, the God of the Old Testament? Abraham's God also had another name in Sumer besides Jehovah, Yahweh, and El Shaddai, which he used in one of his temples in the city of Ur. Another notable document from Abraham's region and era, the Atrahasis, mentions Abraham's deity by name. This Sumerian deity also worshipped brother and sister gods in Mesopotamia and the surrounding regions, according to the cuneiform Anunnaki tablets found in Ur and many other pre- and post-diluvial cities along the Tigris and Euphrates, including Sippar and Nineveh. As well as Abraham and Noah, these deities had a close relationship with them. Can we identify them? Considering Abraham's god's history as a Sumerian deity with a temple dedicated to him in Ur of the Chaldeans, what should we make of it? Early church authorities, particularly the Roman Catholic Church, controlled and
looking at these clay tablets
studies. In
and then
325
hearing
AD,
the story that they have somehow derived from these like broken, shitty clay
in the canonical Bible.
chicken
As
scratch,
curiosity grew, secret books and artifacts,
it makes me
codices,
wonder how much of
cylinders,
it they just made up.
Sumerian
I mean,
tablets and monuments
and it's
inscribed
just
in
it's a
cuneiform gave up their
consequence.
secrets
It's a
to
product
disenfranchised seekers.
of
Darius I
for example,
commissioned the historical marker commemorating the Persian rulers'
the only way
suppression
that
of
someone
rival
would ever
uprising
care about this
between
is if they
522
made an
and
extravagant
486
story
BCE.
from
Sir Henry
fucking
Rawlinson,
these fucking
a
shitty
British
clay
armed forces officer
tablets.
training the army of the Shah
You know what I
of
mean?
Iran, began studying the
So the
inscription in
probability of it
1835.
being made up, I think,
Sir
is
Henry
higher
Rawlinson,
when it's just
who
so
recorded and
extravagant.
decoded 3 distinct languages he discovered in 1835.
Smoking
chiseled
some
into the
Primo
cliffs of
French, nice,
Behestan,
bro.
modern-day Iran.
Oh,
As Behestan's
très
name
bien, oui,
was
oui.
anglicized as Behestan, the monument
Oh.
became known as the Behestan inscription. Rawlinson
Sticolis?
copied the
That's
Persian
not-
inscription,
My
despite
French
its
vocabulary is
inaccessibility
like
when
zero.
climbing the cliff. Elamites were across a chasm, and Babylonians were 4
Right now.
meters above. Both were out of our reach,
Moi,
and we are left with
je
later.
vais
After obtaining a
allumer
syllabary, Rawlinson began
moi-même.
deciphering the Persian text through Grotefend's work. Herodotus's list of Persian
Je,
kings
je
appeared
vais
in the first section of this text.
m'amuler.
Rawlinson cracked the form of cuneiform used for Old Persian by 1838 by matching names with characters. He presented his results to the Royal Asiatic Society in London and Paris. Following decoding the tablets, Major Rawlinson copied the strange wedge-shaped writings etched into the sheer rock face for the British Museum. The ability to translate Old Persian, Anunnaki Elamite, and Akkadian scripts
C'est
from
quoi,
one
c'est
to
quoi, je
another
suis foutu. Je
led
veux
to the
dire,
rediscovery of Mesopotamian
c'est quoi
sites
ça?
in modern-day Iraq, buried beneath the desert sands.
hi.
Examining the first-hand writings and
What's
evidence
foutu?
left by the Egyptians,
I did not- I
Sumerians,
don't know
and
what
early
foutu
church
meant.
authors,
I
sheds
didn't
new
see
light
that
on
when
the
I wrote
historical
moi
truth,
aussi, so
which seems stranger
better not be
than the most
fucking
improbable
fucked
fictional
up.
tales. Many secrets have been revealed by discoveries in ancient cities across Mesopotamia, from Nineveh to Eridu.
I also
in the
think I have
south.
3
Our
subs.
society's civilization
Baron,
foundations rest on the
think-
Genesis accounts that historians and
I don't know
scribes
why
of the
Twitch
past
just
compiled from the actual
Twitch,
evidence.
like everything
The
breaks in
dedication,
Twitch. I think they
sweat,
do an
and blood
update and
of
then
the
all
pioneer
everything just
investigators
breaks.
from the past have unearthed various clues.
So I think my
which have
sub
been
bar
laid
is
down for all to
broken.
see. When recorded, history's texts
fine.
are linked by those in power, often placing truth on the
Je
sidelines.
suis sur Mars.
The
Oh,
intention
très
is to
bien.
perpetuate the controlling influences of the ruling party through a story. Flagrant acts were further obscure by chipping away carved hieroglyphs to subsume the names and ranks of rival deities and creating lists, which are also known as lists of names. For thousands of
Yeah,
years,
so I turned down the
first-hand authors
volume a
have deprived
lot.
humanity
You can
of
barely hear the
truth-telling books,
gameplay now.
such as
I love
Enoch's
it.
book. The truth was left
That
to
true
those appointed
ASMR
because
golden eye.
historical accuracy was unreliable. Throughout history, most people did not read, so this happened readily. Throughout history, scribes and
Strong
priests were
file.
often trained in the lingual arts, so they had their fingers on the pulse of truth. Archaeologists recently discovered and decoded tens of thousands of cuneiform tablets buried for thousands of years beneath the silt and sand of the Anunnaki Mesopotamian plains. Buried for thousands of years, guarding recorded secrets. Because of discovering tens of thousands of clay tablets written in cuneiform, a cuneiform digitization project was launched to extract the tablet secrets. Several prominent museums in London, Paris, and Berlin display Sumerian artifacts and cuneiform
Wow.
tablets. Marriage and trade are documented in Sumerian records found in ancient cities like Uruk, the biblical Erech. As well as Anunnaki records of births and deaths, they provide more critical
sorry
accounts
about
of
earlier.
decrees. Sometimes Sumerian
had to
records
leave.
predate the canonical Bible by thousands of years. The differences between the
apologize.
first-hand historical records and those composed by
I'll probably do a
societal
weightlifting stream
pictures
tomorrow
allow
afternoon.
one to compare the current
Probably have
basis
everything
of
set up
cultural
still.
and social mores with their antecedent counterparts from different cultures toward a synthesis of those perspectives.
Yeah.
As
Sorry,
described in specific detail in the Book of Enoch, Noah's mystifying
I know
birth
it's frustrating because
according to some sources, Noah's father was not
I sometimes go
as
on for
described
like
in
2
Genesis
hours,
chapter
3
5,
hours.
verse 28, but one of the Mesopotamian deities who saved him from the deluge. The Bible tells the same story, illuminating no Sumerian details. Ziusudra, aka Noah, lives in a reed hut in the old Babylonian flood story where the deity speaks to him. The Mesopotamian plains are warned of a flood by this deity. An exciting epiphany is revealed by analyzing birth records, genealogy tables, and deities venerated in Mesopotamian temples. Our present-day knowledge base reveals a cultural lie that has such a profound impact that everything we previously believed is relegated to obscurity, as if it were a conclusion we would not have reached. When Westerners are asked, "Who is Yahweh?" they do not know the answer. It usually includes Jehovah at the end, followed by God's statement as taught explicitly in the Old Testament and canonical Bible. The truth is revealed when one realizes Yahweh was none other than the local Anunnaki deity of the Sumerian citadel of Enlil. For Enlil was mentioned in many Sumerian and other historical accounts. In various Anunnaki temples, from Nineveh to Assur to the Sumerian city of Enlil and his relatives were revered as gods. His brother Enki and Nannar and Inanna also built temples at prominent cultural and trade centers within the region. Unlike the Anunnaki, Enlil was not acting alone. He acted with others known as the Nephilim or Elohim in Genesis chapter 1 verse 26, where this confusing statement is made. Genesis, "Let us make a dapper in our image, in our likeness," says God. Noah or Atrahasis is a mythical creation story that links the same Anunnaki deities venerated in the temples of the Near East with Enlil Yahweh of the Old Testament and his brother Enki Adonai, the hidden us, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Enki and his half-sister Ninmah produce Homo sapiens, a primitive worker in a genetic experiment. Reading texts that predate the Genesis account over 1,700 years, such as the Atrahasis, clarifies the confusion caused by the plural statement us, our, in the biblical creation account. Extensive details are given regarding the results of clinical trials involving the archetype of the human species. Enlil's half-sister, Ninhursag, or Ninmah, and his arch-rival and more scientifically inclined brother, Enki, conducted the trial in an African laboratory. Researchers recognized the level of knowledge required to discuss a topic such as genetic engineering in a document nearly 5,000 years old, which contains a much more detailed account of man's creation, one that makes much more sense in terms of technical and historical aspects, as opposed to the accurate description in the Bible, which is often complementary. Additionally, similar documents shed light on King Upnapishtim of Shuruppak, the biblical Noah, 600 years old when the world was flooded. Different names also identified many deities which appeared to span long periods. Akkadians named the excellent god Sin, after whom the Sinai Peninsula was named Nannar, the moon god, son of Enlil, after various Sumerian cities, including and Haran. Inanna, his sister, wore a crescent moon symbol and had symbols throughout Mesopotamia. She was known to the Akkadians as Ishtar. Herodotus was a Greek historian from Ionia who lived in the 5th century BCE. It is still used today by Egyptologists to classify Egyptian civilization into dynasties. Egyptian priest historian Manetho seems to have agreed with Herodotus's division of Egypt's rulership into 3 dynasties, except that he included an additional era ruled by the gods alone instead of 3. According to Manetho, the first dynasty of Egyptian gods ruled for 12,300 years. Once again, we find astonishingly long reigns of the first Egyptian dynasty rulers. The Sumerian texts reveal Anu assigned the regions of Egypt and Africa to Enki, a high-ranking deity from Eridu, by 3,860 BCE. It just so happens that the Jewish astrological calendar, whose Anunnaki origins are in the Sumerian city of Nippur, began counting in 3,760 BCE. Perhaps you would think it is coincidental, but it is not, according to ancient cuneiform texts. According to Manetho, the second Egyptian dynastic period was ruled by 12 divine rulers for 1,570 years. Thoth, also a son of Enki, was the first god of the second dynasty. Egypt was ruled for 3,650 years by 30 demigods. Scholars believe the Pharaonic dynasty began around 3100 BC and lasted 350 years. It had its capital in Memphis, or Men-Nefer in Greek. Where did these deities come from? The Sumerian kings list further complicates clues to the mystery. According to the records, some of the first kings of Sumer ruled for up to 28,800 years. That is almost unimaginable. The deities worshipped in Mesopotamian temples taught all aspects of civilization to the Sumerians by the deities worshipped in Mesopotamian temples. Besides creating the zodiac, Sumerian deities knew the Earth's equinox orbital plane, tilt axis, and spherical shape. During the Middle Ages, Europe possessed less detailed knowledge than Sumer did. Despite this, Sumer and his surrounding region produced many of the first inventions and advanced achievements of civilizations, including mathematics, meteorology, and law codes. Various traditions describe sin, including those associated with Assyria and the crescent moon symbol found on flags and mosques associated with Islam. The Sumerian goddess Inanna was also known as Hathor in Egypt, and her name is well known and memorialized in many temples,
What, saying that they created
found in the wilderness of the deity
some stuff, and they created the majority of stuff?
Recognized Nannar-Sin as the moon god, and the Egyptian people had Inanna, also known as Hathor.
I just love that you're listening to it, man.
Clay, the genealogy accounts of Nannar-Sin as the son of
As
Enlil
well
in the
in the Jurassic
Sumerian
period,
records,
yeah,
and he was
true.
known as the moon god to the people of the ancient Middle East. History shows that Nannar-Sin had a large following in his cult centers, spread throughout southern Iraq to Syria, Turkey, and Iran. What is the meaning of Nannar-Sin? Nannar-Sin might be the deity that Muhammad encountered in the wilderness, a sacred center for the religion of Islam. The Kaaba stone in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, was initially dedicated to the moon god called Allah there. The mere act of replacing one proper noun results in replacing another, especially with a deity's name. A new epithet replaces the old one.
It's pretty amazing they got all this
Comparisons
from
between the
fucking
Sumerian
clay
storm
tablets.
god Enlil in
It just
Lamentations
blows
of
my
Ur
mind.
and the god of vengeance in the Old Testament prove this. Being witnesses to the Sumerian deity Enlil, whose origins
I guess
were mysterious,
Hammurabi's code
but
was
whose daily
on.
existence
What was
had been
Hammurabi's
recorded
code
and
on? A
witnessed
piece of
by the
granite?
biblical patriarch Abraham and people of the city of Ur, become the
Piece of
Anunnaki
basalt?
city one of the mountain El
Piece of
Shaddai.
limestone?
In the end, Jehovah became a fantastic discovery to the people of Israel that connected the gods of Sumeria with at least one of the gods of the Old Testament. Better-known gods were worshipped elsewhere in the region, like Enki, Aka-Aharu Mazda, as he was known as the god of light and wisdom. Allah replaced Ahura Mazda, aka Nannar-Sin, when Arab conquerors overthrew the Persians in 633 BCE, headquartered at their spectacular capital at Persepolis. In 644 BCE, the Arabs invaded and caused the Zoroastrian faith to decline.
Oh my god, I got the bullets.
Egyptian and Sumerian cultures frequently subsumed names and epithets to solidify power and authority. Several names were merged into a single name, tailor-made to fit the worshipping subject's culture and language. The purpose
Oh, I
was
didn't,
probably to facilitate
I didn't
referring to
shoot
rivals
enough in the
and
corner.
aggregating data
That's a pretty
during
good
convenient
attempt.
times.
It's a bit slow
Considering
though, I
that
missed the
what one
warps.
culture terms a deity, another culture terms another name, the idea of an Anunnaki myth takes on more significance, especially if the name is traceable across cultures. Likewise, the authority of political and religious beliefs in a society is determined by the ruling forces that select the purveyor of truth in history. According to the ruling party or superpower, religious truth originates from subordinated cultures, classified as pagan or occult.
That's true, man.
The winner's beliefs and what others believe is politely referred to as myths rather than as
It's
the
like Anne
politically
Frank's
incorrect
diary.
label of the lie. The armies of Earth's generals
It's just so
have
crazy.
gathered once again in the Middle East, be it truth or fiction, dogma or doctrine. In the Anunnaki Gods trilogy by Zechariah Sitchin, Enlil and Enki
Do you think they
and their
faked
offspring
Anne
are
Frank's
described
diary?
as
Oh
having
no.
battled. Could this explain the current conflicts involving Iran, Iraq, Syria and Israel? Will
I've never
Enki's
heard of
offspring
Persepolis.
disturb the destructive plan of his
Oh, like Persia.
arch-rival Enlil, Zeus to
The
the
Persian
Greeks,
Empire city.
and his warmonger son, Ninurta, Apollo to the Greeks? Jesus is rejected as the Messiah because he was the offspring of Enki, Jehovah's rival. This is the term
Oh
An.
wow.
Sumerologists interpret Una,
Really?
Ki, means heaven to earth, The critical
several
point is the connection
pillars?
between the term heaven and the planet of Anunnaki
What were the
origin.
pillars?
Sitchin wrote about
What
Nibiru
were
in
they made of? What were they?
1976
You
as
probably mean.
detailed in the 12th planet. Additionally,
It's
according to
2023. We now
Mesopotamian
know
literature, such as the
way
Epic
more
of
than we
Gilgamesh,
did back
Anu,
then.
the father of the critical players, Enlil and Enki, served as head of the Anunnaki Council of 12. Ni-bi-ru may be constructed from the digital cuneiform script using 3 syllables. Therefore, the Anunnaki came or were sent from
design.
Anu
That's
to the
cool,
earth.
man.
When Enlil
That's
met
really
Ziusudra
cool.
on Mount Ararat, he called
Wow,
his race
that's
Anunna.
probably the most
Therefore,
amazing thing.
Anua is an alternative spelling of Anunna. Similarly, as shown in the previous example of Nibiru, the cuneiform script is assigned a unique set of uniform hexadecimal codes. It is imperative to look at the planet Nibiru with the word heaven, as used in the Bible when re-examining prayers like, Our Father who art in heaven, which sheds new light on the Father in heaven, namely Anu. So the prayer had to originate among his descendants on earth, Enlil, Enki, Ninmah, or Ninhursag. Why did the Anunnaki leave Nibiru
Yeah, you're
to come to
probably
Earth?
right.
Nibiru orbits the Sun in an elliptical retrograde orbit, 3,600 years beyond Pluto. According to maps found in Anunnaki lands and reports from the IRAS Naval Observatory, Sumerians lived on a brown dwarf in Nibiru. Mount Graham's intense Catholic focus uses the Lucifer scope to watch for Nibiru's arrival. Nibiru has already arrived. Why would an advanced civilization on Nibiru send a team of scientists to Earth? Political struggles for power were ongoing, and environmental pressures attracted the attention of the ruling council of Nibiru. Brown dwarfs do not receive enough solar radiation to maintain a habitable surface temperature, as the Earth does, given its optimal distance from the Sun. Nibiru's atmosphere was created artificially or by gases and steam released by its geothermal heat. A planet in its outer orbit is frequently exposed to shallow levels of direct solar radiation. During the close perigee,
dude.
the atmosphere receives the most significant
That's fucking
radiation dose.
baller as fuck,
Sitchin's
dude.
published history timeline states that approximately 450,000 years ago,
That's really
life
baller,
on
dude.
Nibiru faced extinction because of a deteriorating atmosphere and radiation exposure. The situation was dire during Nibiru's close perigee with the Sun.
The columns.
In Nibiru, Anu wrests
So I wonder if
control
the
of the kingship
granite. I
from
wonder
the
if the
unjust ruler
Egyptian
Alalu,
granite.
which led to his exile. Alalu escapes in a
Look
spacecraft
like
and
limestone,
discovers
maybe.
gold on Earth in anticipation of his exile sentence.
Yeah,
During
look like
Alalu's veiled
limestone.
attempt to save Nibiru's atmosphere,
Pretty
he
fucking
uses
epic.
his precious metal discovery as a peace offering. The ionized shield will shield the planet from solar
Was
radiation
this not
by
used in the
dispersing
start
ionized
of
gold particles
The
into
Exorcist?
the planet's degrading atmosphere.
Am I tripping balls?
Enki, Anu's scientifically minded son, is dispatched to assess
With the
the chance of
dogs
recovering
fighting
Alalu's
and the
reported
statue?
gold from Earth. Enki departed for Earth approximately 5,000 Earth years later,
Never saw it,
455,000 years ago,
It's not a very good movie.
noting that a Nibirian year equals 3,600 Earth years. According to Sumerian records, the first city colonized by the Anunnaki was Eridu, in the Persian Gulf headquarters, including the Sumerians' King's List. Enki and a small group of support staff began prospecting for gold in the waters of the Gulf soon after arriving on Earth. Anu sends his younger son, Enlil, to help Enki speed up the gold recovery process. Enki and Enlil invited Anu to Earth to guide the
So he
arduous
was
mining
like-
task, given the infrastructure required to crush rock and process gold-laden ore.
Sorry.
Enki moved the mining operation from the Persian
He
Gulf
was like
to the Zambezi
Arnold.
River in South Africa, where the ore was mined.
As the Turkish
Anu arrived on Earth approximately 450,000 to
Prince
360,000 years ago, and his son
in
Enki
Around the World
informed
in
him of
80
the current
Days
status of gold mining on
with
Earth.
Jackie Chan.
The brothers argued
Have you
over
seen
which
that?
of them would take care of the mining operation in
That's
Africa and oversee the command headquarters
Arnold has had a
in
lot of
Mesopotamia,
ridiculous
specifically
roles,
Ripple. In the Age of
including
Aces story,
Junior.
Anu, Enlil, and Enki
But man, that
drew lots
Around
to
the World in
determine
80
which mission
Days,
they
the
would pursue
Turkish
separately,
prince, is probably
creating
one
a
of the
space
most
between the two
ridiculous.
half-brothers that were often at odds. According to Sumerian accounts, Enki was Anu and
Based on
Antu's
Greek
firstborn son,
accounts.
and Enlil was the rightful heir. According to Niburian inheritance rules, the
How are you
rightful
so
heir is the
knowledgeable,
male's
Toad?
child and half-sister.
Wow,
The Anunnaki
insane.
did this based on their scientific knowledge.
That's incredible, Toad.
It is important to note that the female contribution to the genetic material
I see they kind of
includes
pieced it
mitochondrial
together because it
DNA,
looks like
but the
there's like
male
different
contribution does
pieces,
not,
you know what I mean?
which predisposes the genetic
But then
bloodline
again, this
toward
geography,
maternal
so who
descent.
knows?
Enlil governed the Mesopotamian region, where Terah and his
That's
son
baller,
Abraham
bro.
would ultimately serve him in the temple at Ur. The Indus Valley
I feel
region
like we have
was
to know
given
about
to
the
Anu's
creative
favorite granddaughter,
civilization, yeah, I know.
Inanna, while the Anunnaki kept
So
the
why
Sinai
you're a big
Peninsula.
GoldenEye fan?
To restore
No,
Niburian's
just
degenerating
stupid
atmosphere,
joke.
Enki was sent to Abzu, Africa, to speed up the gold mining operation. Enki returned to Nibiru to run the kingdom. In 3760 BCE, the division took place and was completed. Ninhursag, Enki's half-sister and a medical officer, traveled to Earth approximately 415,000 years ago and established a medical clinic at Shurapak. Niburian astronauts needed medical support during their space travels. The Anunnaki complained about aging effects that were not noticeable on Nibiru. On Earth, they experienced faster circuits, which had a much slower circuit, 3,600 years. Sumeria became home to several cities, adding to the Eridu built by Enki upon his arrival. The mining operation and subsequent ore processing were carried out of these cities, and the infrastructure needed to stay in touch with Nibiru.
Thanks, Toad, for laughing.
Ancient astronauts' historical event is contextual to the account's background information. The Anunnaki Council of 12 met approximately 300,000 years ago in the southern African domain of Enki to discuss how to increase gold production rates. Several subservient workers were brought to Earth by the higher-ranking members of the Anunnaki Council, supposedly Enki himself. Even though they were called working-class agents, they were highly advanced compared to humans. Atrahasis refers to the miners conquered as Persia? But the Lost Book of Enoch calls them watchers. Ijiji were assigned labor-intensive tasks, including dredging rivers, digging and constructing
Alexander the Great?
Building cities, and mining gold ore in southern Africa. During their alien deployment to Earth, they were not provided with female companions.
How do you know all
measured
this?
in Iberian orbit lengths as
I'm thinking of sharing.
Ryan Moorhen translated
I guess
the
this
first
is your
tablet from the
fucking
Atrahasis,
history.
the old Babylonian version. Atrahasis, tablet number 1. When the gods did the work and bore the burden, the load was too heavy.
faith.
The work is too challenging,
Insane.
the trouble too great. Ijiji was made to carry a 7-fold workload by the mighty Anunnaki. Their father Anu was the king, their counselor,
What
warrior,
is
Elin,
Zoroastrian?
chamberlain, Ninurta, the canal
I don't know what that is, man.
Anuji.
Alexander
As soon
the
as they
Great.
gained Anunnaki lands, they, after
Greek,
casting lots,
Greek,
the gods decided.
Zoroastrian,
Anu ascended into the sky.
Greek philosophy.
Enlil also took the earth for his people. Enlil also took the bolt that bars the sea. Enki was assigned a too far-sighted task. After Anu ascended
That's why he's called the Great and not the Tyrant.
The had descended below, the Anunnaki of the sky. The workload was put in Ijiji. Ijiji dug canals. The Ijiji dug out canals, the lifelines of the land, to clear the channels. Clearing the land's lifelines, the channels was necessary. The gods dug the Tigris riverbed.
Really?
Then the Euphrates were dug up.
Are you serious? That's amazing, dude.
The Apsu of the Anunnaki, inside it raised its highest point of all the mountains. They carried the excess burden for 3,600 years. Arduous work, night and day. Grumbling and blaming each other, they groaned. They groaned under the weight of the excavated soil. I would like to engage the chamberlain. Get him to relieve us of our tedious work as well. The Ijiji, summarizing the key points of the first tablet, surround Enlil's encampment and demand to be relieved of their excessive workload. On Nibiru, Enlil and Enki's father, Anu, are summoned for advice and counsel. Enki is also invited to help find a solution to the unrest in the mines. The Ijiji gold miners are temporarily appeased with promises of work relief. As a replacement for the Ijiji gold diggers, Enki and Ninhursag, his half-sister, design a genetically engineered primitive worker. We will introduce the reader to evidence that supports Anunnaki's presence on Earth. Anunnaki evidence on Earth. Are there any physical signs the Anunnaki were here on Earth? The categories of evidence examined include astrological, technical, documentary, and biological evidence. On the Enuma Elish clay tablets displayed at the University of Pennsylvania Museum, the Sumerian creation tale is represented as an allegory of celestial warriors whose skirmishes and exploits led to the planets of their hosts forming circuits around the sun. In the Babylonian version, cuneiform inscribed clay tablets contain the tale approximately between 1936 and 1901 BCE. Approximately 2000 BCE was the height of Marduk's reign, according to Sumerian records, the first son of Enki and the national deity.
I'm learning stuff.
The creation tale of
the
Nibiru
video podcast,
is said to have existed in
and I'm learning stuff
in which Nibiru was named the homeworld.
In chat.
Marduk replaced Nibiru as the homeworld in OBV. There are exceptions to the accurate representation of planet names and their orbital distances from the sun. The Babylonian creation account reveals an advanced knowledge of our solar system, which was only recently confirmed by modern science. We may be only now reaching the point where we can validate the Babylonian epic of creation based on current scientific knowledge. The Sumerian records refer to 10 planets, compared to our understanding and acceptance of only 9 today. Instead of 9, there are 10 planets in the Sun and Moon's account. Below, I summarize the epic of creation. Mercury and the Sun conspire to destroy Tiamat at the story's start. Mercury is shielded from the radiation of the Sun when Enki learns of the plot. Mercury is put to sleep by Enki, as is the Sun. Mercury is in a sleepless daze. Enki, another name for
insane.
unfastened his
Imagine
belt,
doing that
removed
strat.
his crown,
To
took
get
off
the
his
ammo?
radiance mantle, and put it on
Guys,
himself.
this is the new strat.
This means Mercury's orbit has temporarily been altered because of the solar radiation from the Sun, as Enki's planet
I got
is
20
Neptune.
bullets, bros.
For 900 years, Nibiru
And
rested
bitch
on
ain't
top of
won.
the Sun, captured in the Sun's orbit. This was during the reign of Enlil.
I
Solar
like
radiation
OCM.
affects Ea, Damkina, and their firstborn son, Marduk. As the progeny of the high-ranking Anunnaki
Open the
council
door.
members, Marduk establishes his right
Like
to be born
what? Come
in this
on,
account.
man.
Tarsus,
I
Pisces,
shot
and
too many
Capricorn
bullets.
are signs of the zodiac in the
Shot
heavens.
too many bullets.
Earth's moon, Kingwa, held the tablet of destiny,
And I
which
didn't
was
get
aligned
the
with Tiamat.
I didn't
In
get
response to
the
Tiamat's
ammo
fury, stirred
in the
by
mine
sun,
boost because I didn't get the
Neptune
boost.
turns back and reports to Anshar, Saturn. As a result, Tiamat veers off its orbital path.
It's just so
Marduk,
dumb.
Nibiru, volunteers to help disband
It's all my
Tiamat's
fault.
forces.
all
Nibiru's
my
orbit
fault.
captures a constellation of planets, stars, and remnants of Tiamat. Saturn's gravitational pull pulls Nibiru into its orbit, providing a calming effect. Mercury and Venus are ancestors of Saturn, which is alluded to by sending a satellite or moon
What the
from
fuck blew
Saturn
up?
to Mercury
Like what
and Venus.
blew up?
In Hulu Wind
What?
is a whirlwind that releases 7 winds against Tiamat. An asteroid, Arrow, strikes Tiamat, splitting it open. The result is the destruction of Kingdom.
Yo, what's
One
up,
half of
Ace?
Tiamat's mass is
Got hit
down,
up, but this is the
sending it
app.
to the roof of the sky, drawing a thunderbolt
What is
across
this
it
app?
on a guard to hold it in place. The water was arranged so that it
TSM AMR
coagulated
demo,
to an ocean.
yes.
After correcting
Home-
Nibiru's course,
what
the
is this?
location was affixed
Is
to
this
the
the link
stands
for
of
the
Enlil,
app?
planetary affiliation
Yes,
Jupiter, zodiac
yes,
symbol
yes.
Taurus, and Enki, zodiac affiliation Pisces, planetary affiliation Neptune.
Amazing.
Formerly, the Earth's moon belonged to Tiamat. The reader should read the Enuma
That's gotta
Elish
be a
in its
quote,
original form
'cause then
to
we can-
understand the
'cause then
detailed
that's the link.
creation epic. According to this allegory, at the point of creation in our solar system, Tiamat,
Is
Uranus,
Toad shift
had an
dimensional? I
established
think so.
orbit between Mars and Jupiter.
I mean, yes.
Earth had not yet been created.
I mean, I don't want to dox
The
him,
origins of Nibiru have been the subject of
It's up to
various
him whether
hypotheses
he
regarding
would
its
say.
capture in our
but
solar
I'm gonna add that
system's
as a
orbit.
quote.
As a result,
'Cause then you
the
can
battle
have-
for
you can
the
keep the
orbital
info.
position began. As Nibiru entered its orbit around the Sun, passing the outer planets, introduced gravitational forces that tilted Uranus.
Oh my god.
Pluto was dislodged from its orbit around Saturn by these forces, promoting it to planethood before
God.
it was demoted. On its
You gotta
path
go,
to
but good
solar
luck.
perigee, one of
Oh,
Nibiru's
that's thank-
satellites
Yo,
struck
thanks,
Tiamat,
Ace. Appreciate
and
it,
on its
man.
following
Yeah.
orbital path,
I got a
Nibiru hit
103
Tiamat
yesterday
directly.
with this new
A large
strat.
portion of Tiamat broke
for the
off
double
to
O.
become the Earth,
My
with the remnant
PB's
debris
1
becoming
minute,
the
but
asteroid belt, currently positioned between Mars and Jupiter. When the
I'm
Earth
not doing
was
open
in
door.
its present orbit, it congealed
I think
into
I'm
a
too
solid
slow.
planet, capturing
gonna
Nibiru's moon
try.
as its own. The Anunnaki creation account, read every spring in
Like, this
Babylon,
isn't too slow.
seems to corroborate some
Oh,
modern
what?
scientific analysis of Earth's rifts in the Pacific and its colossal moon. It is an accidental
I'm gonna add that
panspermia
quote
instead
after.
of the one
See, I still get a
proposed.
boost. I get a boost
According
every
to
time I
him,
double O. Pretty
intelligent
much. That was too
beings
early.
intentionally seeded planet Earth with alien life forms. The seeds of life could also have been transferred to Earth. By
No,
impact
why
from
the
Nibiru.
lag, man?
Another planet in our solar system is the Anunnaki's home planet of Nibiru, whose apogee is beyond Pluto, in a 3,600-year retrograde orbit around the Sun. Dr. Robert S. Harrington, the former chief of the U.S. Naval Observatory. Pluto and
What's
its moon
Plaza
Charon were
46?
discovered by
Yeah.
Tombaugh in 1930 and
I don't know what that means,
1978.
but that's what I've been pacing. 46.
IRAS, an infrared astronomical satellite, was launched in 1983 in response to wobbles
I have
in
no idea
orbits
what
of
it
Uranus
means.
and Neptune. Scientists used the satellite to seek the planet, suspected of causing the wobbles. Researchers concluded that an object 4 times the size of our
Yeah,
planet
you
had been detected
you
by
moved this
IRAS.
weekend, right? Sorry to
In
not dox you
1992,
also.
Harrington and Van Flandern of the Naval
But I hope that
Observatory
went well.
published a newspaper article. They
You
used
may
all
have
the information available.
moved on
According
from
to
the
their
stream
observations,
as well.
They believe a 10th planet has been discovered in our solar system.
Thanks, bro. Let's see.
This planet is
It's
called
nice seeing
an
you.
intruder planet. Dr. Harrington and Zechariah Sitchin, both familiar with Sitchin's writings about a 10th planet, met to correlate
I guess I really gotta pass him away.
An ancient Babylonian creation epic.
I guess that is the truth.
Other space probes like Pioneer 10 and Pioneer 11, Harrington agreed with Sitchin that Nibiru was. Every 3,600 years, a planet as immense
See,
as Nibiru
that could be the strat, passing that guy away.
Because of Nibiru's passage,
I didn't do it, but
reversals have occurred,
what? That back
causing
boost was
changes
so dumb.
in Earth's precession. Additionally, the perihelion may be responsible for potentially dangerous meteors and debris carried by asteroids. Building evidence and technology. It is easy to find unusual artifacts around the world, especially those that seem to contradict the known capabilities of the civilization. Hieroglyphs found in the Egyptian temple of Abydos depict rockets, airplanes, submarines, and even an advanced helicopter similar to the United States AH-64 Apache helicopter. Baalbek, Lebanon, has the trilithon stones. For building materials, why choose the most challenging one? Large blocks of stone weighing 1,000 tons or more. Likely they did so because they could, and it was easy for them. Among fascinating discoveries was the Temple of Hathor atop the biblical Mount Sinai. The temple contained a strange substance created by smelting gold. This find was the rediscovery of monoatomic gold by David Hudson. The massive stone blocks used in temple construction may have been moved using these anti-gravity superconductors. Furthermore, there is evidence that the Anunnaki of a chosen bloodline consumed the monoatomic gold as conical bread cakes depicted on Hathor's temple walls. The short orbital cycles on Earth damaged the Anunnaki DNA. Specifically, the telomeres were damaged by proximity to the sun. Because of the multi-pass annealing process applied to the smelting gold.
There we go, that was way faster. I wasn't grinding on the fucking walls that time.
And serve as a bridge to other dimensions. Antimony and other ingredients were added to the gold to turn it into a white powder and cause it to
pretty fast. Oh no,
Besides
that's not good.
Airplanes, incredible solar and lunar temples aligned to solstices and equinoxes, along with tens of thousands of Anunnaki tablets and written accounts of advanced beings teaching civilizing technologies to indigenous peoples. There is overwhelming evidence that the Anunnaki were here on Earth. Anunnaki astronauts left behind impressive remnants in ancient Mesopotamian cities such as Eridu, Babylon, and Uruk, where Gilgamesh reigned. The following evidence is listed. Baalbek defies current engineering methods. Gold mines carbon dated to the period that Enki was said to have been in Africa approximately 200,000 years ago. Sumerian baked clay tablets describe the Anunnaki, their mission, and personalities. At the University of Pennsylvania Museum, Numa Elish has a very sophisticated and technically accurate description of celestial collisions. It describes our current solar system's composition. The Romans knew about Pluto in this depiction, but it took NASA until the 1980s to identify it positively. What made them realize this? In 1973, the University of Chicago photographed the city of Eridu with its baked bricks protruding from the sands of the Iraqi
big
desert.
Boost.
The Sumerian king's list confirms the
big
city
scam.
king. This is where Earth Station 1 is. In the early 1850s, we understood the reality of those living in the ancient Middle East. Archaeological
I think I should look down more, make the warp better, get a better angle.
To the world's attention. Anunnaki's records of marriage, birth, and legal contracts were mixed with evidence of Anunnaki's history. Sumerian mythological entities were not invented, but found in those records that the Sumerians knew that the Anunnaki astronauts were not from Earth and were elevated to godhood in the various cities where they lived and built
bad line, but
ziggurat
we'll
temples.
take it.
In the Sumer civilization, the aliens were flesh and blood who
Where are the
interacted with
guards,
the people
man?
and their underlying genetic creation. In Nineveh, Ashurbanipal's library was burned, preserving many clay tablets for antiquity. Sipar's Anunnaki spaceport recently found a sealed 9-by-6-foot room. Anunnaki's unbroken record of Earth's journey is detailed in nearly 400 chronologically ordered clay tablets within the sealed chamber. During his time at Sitchin, Sumerian records of the Anunnaki were made public. The information has only recently become accepted. Tablets have now been digitized to increase speed
I gotta
and
see up
accuracy.
that shit.
Atrahasis texts and Sumerian records point to Anunnaki gold mines in South Africa. Anunnaki gold was mined in Africa, according to the Sumerian Atrahasis document. Carbon dating has proved that those ancient mines may have been used by 200,000-year-old miners related to our biological ancestors. evidence based on biological genetics.
I don't know what to do there. I see people
Genetic
going left
evidence
strafe to right
suggests
strafe.
that
It's
the
just so
Anunnaki
crazy.
developed primitive workers
too
in South
much.
Africa near gold mines purchased by Anglo-American PLC, a mining corporation. Shimti, Enki's genetics lab, is precisely where the genetic Eve study tracking mitochondrial DNA specified it should be. The genetic Eve study also tracked the mutation of the Y chromosome, leading to the same area and time frame as the genetic Adam study. The atrahasis describes how animal DNA was mixed with Anunnaki DNA until the ultimate solution, Homo sapiens. The Anunnaki's intelligence claimed that humanity had received accounts of our technological advances, leading to advanced space travel after only 200,000 years of
I guess I
evolution.
gotta shoot the
This
wall more,
contradicts how
door
tool
more.
improvement iteratively occurred over millions of years instead of rapid paradigm shifts like the Sumerians. Enki, the scientist, the creator of man. Almost 432,000 years ago, the Gyges colonized the earth with Enki. Later, the Gyges were accompanied by lower echelon workers dedicated to gold ore mining. With the mining operations in South Africa, the Anunnaki were in a difficult position. The mining operation was moved to Abzu, Africa, along the Zambezi River after landing in the Persian Gulf, building Eridu, and failing to glean adequate quantities of gold from the ocean. After working in the mines for long periods under what seemed to be harsh conditions, the miners rebelled around Enlil's fortress and demanded relief. According to the account, the miners worked for 3,600 years. One Shah coincidentally equals one Liberian solar year before retiring. Atrahasis, tablet number 1. Enlil, let us go together. Allah, the counselor of gods, made his voice heard from the throne. Additionally, he spoke to the gods of his brothers. Welcome, let us carry Enlil with us. From his dwelling, the counselor of gods, the warrior, cry battle. His speech caused the gods to set fire to their tools. Their bolts for fire, their weapons for the god of fire. The flare-ups began. As they approached the gate of warrior Ellis's dwelling, it was night, the middle watch. The house was surrounded by Nusku and Kalkal, Enlil's guards, alerted him to the rabble surrounding his house. Enlil brought weapons to his dwelling when he discovered the Gyges miners were surrounding him. Enlil's vizier Nusku ordered the miners to surrender. His father Anu advised him to fetch Enki and seek counsel from him. Anu and Enki had an impromptu council meeting to discuss what to do about the revolting lower echelons of the Anunnaki.
What?
Anu,
so
Lord
dumb.
of the Sky, and Enki, Lord of the Apsu, appear on the Atrahasis tablet. These are the most powerful Anunnaki. Enlil spoke up. She got up, and the case moved along. As she spoke to the mighty gods, have they risen against me? Shall I engage in battle? Anu spoke to Enlil, saying, let Nusku go out. Get the word from Gyges who have surrounded your door. Nusku, fully armed, approached the mob and asked on behalf of Anu, Enki, Enlil, and the Anuji, who was governor, and what the problem was. The Anarchy of the miners instructed Nusku to tell Enlil. Every single god has declared war. We have stopped digging. We are suffering under an excessive load.
You do this in 2.x,
Nusku's issue
and
on
you
behalf
pass
of
the guard
miners,
away, you
Enlil
shoot
wept
the guard
and
to
then
get
turned
the
to his
ammo.
father Anu and asked that one miner be made an example of by being fired publicly. Anu raised his voice.
In the
He also
cutscene.
asked his brothers, what are we complaining about? Their work was indeed too strenuous. Their trouble was too great. The earth resounded every day. We kept hearing the warning signal. It was loud enough. Why are we blaming them? Enki, Ea.
I gotta pass him away. I gotta
The work was
plan
too
to
strenuous.
shoot him.
The trouble was too much.
Well, I really
A
have
womb
to
goddess,
pass
Belet
this
Ili,
guy
is
away.
present.
Though.
Let her create primeval man. He must bear the yoke. To bear the work of Enlil, Belet Ili, the womb goddess, is present.
I should
let the womb
left
goddess bear
strafe,
offspring, and let man bear the work
headshot
of the
him.
gods. Nintu,
really
aka Belet Ili,
or
spoke to the
see
most
up
powerful
headshot
gods
him.
and made her voice heard. Making him is not appropriate for me. Enki makes everything pure through his work. I will use the clay he gives me. Enki addressed the gods and made his voice heard. I will wash on the 1st, 7th, and 15th of each month. Thus, one god should be slaughtered. In addition, the gods can be purified by immersion. Nintu must mix clay. He was flesh and blood. He was also a god and a human king. It will be mixed with clay. I want to hear the drumbeat forever. Let God create a ghost from his flesh and proclaim it to be his living sign. Furthermore, let the ghost exist, so that the slain god will never be forgotten.
There's like no lag.
Yes, yes.
Why?
Yes, said the assembly.
Like why?
The powerful Anunnaki assigns the fates. As a result, the Anunnaki Council, led by Anu, decides that Enki and Nintu, the medical officer, also known as Ninhasag, should develop a primitive worker to replace the rebellious Gyges miners.
Pretty low lag.
Now crowned as mistress of all gods, Nintu addressed the Anunnaki Council after eventual success.
Like, look at this fucking
Multiple genetic experiments, failures, and mishaps are recounted in length in the Atrahasis.
Oh.
Even the mother of humans has to submit a TPS report to justify her accomplishment to her boss. I did a great job. I completed the work you ordered from me. By destroying his intelligence, you have slaughtered a god. Thanks to me, you no longer have to do the tedious work.
No.
Man has been subjected to your will. Genetic manipulation is understood in modern civilized societies, but it is so common that it is not a big deal. It is possible that the Anunnaki, who lived at least 450,000 years before our civilization and had conquered space travel, could do in vitro fertilization. The Atrahasis account says they certainly could. This is a severe challenge to the idea of man as a creator. It makes me wonder if the biological scientist of our century performs any different functions than Enki did in his African laboratory. Observe the Anunnaki concept
what does
of
it
transferring
mean?
A spirit from a
My
sacrifice
friends,
being
what
to
does
another.
it mean?
This is like stories of underworld energy, soul maintenance. According to the Enuma Elish creation story, the collision between Nibiru and Tiamat, which became the earth, could have contaminated the earth with the seeds of life from Nibiru. According to Enki's writings, those seeds of life came from the creator of all. So even the Gyges, who were sometimes called Anunnaki,
such a
had
scam.
a concept above a god.
Such
Based
a
on
scam.
Nibiru's evolutionary process,
That's my fault.
Enki regarded the bipedal hominids found on the
a
African
little
plains
too wiggly.
as a species. As a result, the evolutionary boost provided to early hominids was not a permanent change, but a temporal head start.
Oh, that's what I mean.
Humanity
that
is
should be the
indebted to the
strat,
creator
honestly.
of all for the seeds of
Did he
life.
pass away?
The genetic
Yeah.
seed of Enki was the archetypal Adapa. the
Honestly,
first
that
human
might
to
just be
carry
the strat. I
Anunnaki
might just
mark.
go downstairs and shoot
Our
that guy a
hybrid
lot.
Anunnaki genes contain the ancient astronaut identity and intelligence.
In the left strafe.
Given the exact age of the Atrahasis tablets, dated to 1700 BCE, an important point is brought to the
No,
reader's
that's too
attention.
hard.
Having attempted to eliminate all references to the other members of the
Yo,
Anunnaki
what's up,
Council in
Hayoshi?
the Torah narrative,
The
especially
fuck, I
any
know.
reference to Enki,
I know,
the
right?
Enlilite
The
perspective
fuck am I
describes the
doing playing
background
this
scene
level?
of a historical biblical flood. The Sumerian flood account was copied and changed to create the Genesis account. Hebrew priests held captive in Babylon wrote the Genesis account.
Oh god.
During their captivity, they learned the truth about the biblical flood. Enlil, however, became the monotheistic ancient astronaut
Well,
god
I have
they
20
worshipped.
bullets.
They were terrified of Enlil's wrath, after all. The sons of God saw the beauty of the daughters of men as the number of men
No.
increased on earth,
Whatever,
the
let's
sons
just
of
practice.
God who could choose whom to marry. The Lord replied, "My spirit will not contend with man forever, because he is mortal. His days will be 120 years." In those days and afterward,
Hate my
when the
input,
sons
man.
of God married the daughters of men and had children with them, the Nephilim was on earth. Their renown
fuck
was
off.
legendary. Genesis refers to the destructive flood caused by a different catalyst than the Atrahasis account. The Sumerian account describes Enlil as furious
need more
at human
bullets,
noise
man.
and wanting to silence them. According to Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 to 8, the Nephilim took human wives, potentially breaking a galactic law by marrying a genetically enslaved person. Enlil ignores this and bases the extinction of humankind on how evil men were. Man's wickedness on earth had become
I
so
gotta shoot
severe
less bullets
that
in
the
that
Lord saw that
hallway.
every
I
thought
just
in
gotta do the
man's heart was
6.
evil all the
6
time.
bullet.
Having created man on earth, the Lord was grieved. His heart was filled with pain. Therefore the Lord said, "I will wipe humanity from the face of the earth, whom I have created." The Genesis account and the Atrahasis account can be compared. A casual observer should readily detect two bald-faced lies. In Genesis 6:5, Enlil does not have created humankind. According to the Atrahasis, Enki
They pass him away there?
was solely responsible, predating the Genesis account by 1,700 years.
I did.
While humankind's
That would
thoughts
be an
continually
insane
evil,
strat.
including when they toil in the mines for Enlil's gold ore. The genuine complaint in
That'd
the
be best case
Atrahasis account
scenario.
was that humankind was noisy and could not sleep. Was it
I
too
will
much
bust out
trouble?
the door
Or
and
were
try
the
to shoot him
ideas of
right
his
away.
arch-rival brother's prolific
Boom.
offspring rising against his authority
Oh,
more likely
that was
than the
pretty
facts?
close.
Using terminology
Shoots
in
boss.
Genesis 6:5 suggests that the biblical ghostwriter Enlil was not a trained scientist. The Anunnaki knowledge of good and evil was present in Sumeria, the Eden, and was used by the Anunnaki. This plant had a transformative effect at the DNA level, changing human consciousness. Enlil tells Adapa in the Garden of Eden that if he eats it, he will die. This lie is countered by Enki, who assures Adapa that he will not die, but become one of us, one god. Enki tells the truth and is ostracized and symbolized as a snake, whereas Enlil lies and proclaims himself to be God. Enki's stated outcome of Adam not dying but realizing his nakedness proves a lie.
Oh,
Enlil
such a
did not
scam.
want the seed
Guys,
of the
there's
knowledge
so much
regarding good and
fucking
evil
lag, man.
consumed for this very reason.
It's
His
different,
view
man.
was that access to higher consciousness should not be controlled.
Some
Unexpected
runs are
genocidal
so
acts
lag-free and
followed
other
Enlil's
runs are so
genocidal actions.
laggy.
According to the first man breeding program,
Oh,
humans
man.
became prolific
I'm
and
gonna
loud
learn so
after
much.
600 years.
I've learned so much
Less
from
than
Toad.
600 years
The fact that
passed since 600.
steviol
Additionally, the
glycosides,
country became too large, the
steroid
people too
hormone
many.
structure,
There was much noise in the country. Enlil was forced to listen to their clamor as God grew restless.
glycosides.
In his address to the gods, he said, "There is too much human noise. I am losing sleep over it. The Sharupu disease shall break out." This seems to be the beginning
endocrine
of the all-out
disruptors,
conflict
right?
between
The
Enki and
endocrine
Enlil.
system, the hormone
Enki
system,
created humanity with the aid of Ninhasag, freeing the gods from
the
the toil of the
pituitary
gold mines he promised.
gland,
He would be offended if he heard his half-brother
Stevia.
Enlil ordered the release of a disease on the populace, whose obvious
Stevelandia,
intent was to wipe out the source of the noise, namely humanity. The book will explore other deep-seated sources of conflict between the two.
stevia.
They included birthright, inheritance, and official rank.
You ever see the sweetener?
The Bible
No,
corroborates
is that
the
what's in the
timeline
sweeteners?
from the creation of the Adapa to where Enlil
Really?
wanted to end them, namely 600 years later. Noah was around this age at the
I try
time
to
of
not-
the flood.
They put
The
it in low
floodgates of the
carb
heavens
orange.
were
Yeah,
opened
that
on
sounds
day,
terrible,
in the
dude.
600th year of Noah's life. There were 40 days and nights
Oh,
of
for
rain.
sure.
Atrahasis contradicts the 40-day
For sure,
continuous
they probably
rain in the
make a lot of
Sumerian account,
hormones.
stating only 7 days. Also interesting is the age shown in Genesis 5 from Adam to Noah. Mahalalel's age is 895 years, and Jared's age is 962 years. Would it be possible that the ages were just exaggerated, or could the Anunnaki bloodline, in a more pure state, before dilution, after generational mixing with humanity, account for the exceptional ages noted? It is also worth noting that the Anunnaki had a genetic age constraint on their primitive workers. Therefore, they had the intelligence to follow instructions in the mines and a short lifespan to prevent overpopulation. Humankind was given a maximum lifespan of 120 years in Genesis 6:3. The Atrahasis account agrees with
Low
this.
carb
The oldest person
orange
recorded in
juice.
history was Miss Jean Calment, a Frenchwoman who lived from 21st February 1875 to 4th August 1997. She was 132 years and 184 days old.
Oh, why?
It appears she broke the Anunnaki genetic mold by a small amount, namely 2 years
Missing
and
white girl
164
alert.
days. Despite the multitudes of species that have lived on Earth, the 120-year genetic design target appears to have worked well.
I hope they find her.
Atrahasis establishes a close relationship between Atrahasis and the mighty god Enki near the end. According to the genealogy in the Lost Book of Enoch, Atrahasis was the son of Enki and Batanash, the wife of Lamech in biblical times. Atrahasis, Enki's son, coordinates a rebellion among humankind, instructing it on how to perform a peaceful protest and shame the powers, Enlil, into ceasing the punishment by Sharupu disease, whatever it was. Enki's intercession has worked, much to Enlil's dismay, as he clenches his jaws to prepare for the next attack on human fodder. Enlil orders a revolutionary, genocidal tactic. Enlil addressed the most powerful gods. I am losing sleep over humankind's noise. I am losing
Do
sleep
identify
over their
as a
racket.
woman?
Stop supplying food to the people. Let the vegetation be too scarce to satisfy their hunger.
This area's going
Adad
to
should
hell.
wipe
Dang,
away
dude.
his
Sorry,
reign.
man.
Iskur Adad is
I know,
Enlil's
like,
son.
the Philadelphia,
Let no floodwater
Baltimore.
flow from
I was
the
just
springs
thinking about
below.
that. That belt.
Let the wind sweep,
That belt is
strip
fucked.
the ground bare, and let the
Sorry,
clouds gather,
Baron.
but no rain. Isaba should stop
I love
up
you,
her
Baron,
bosom
but
if the field yielded
the
a diminished
Baltimore
harvest.
What, like the Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia built?
Runs intercession on behalf of the people,
sure,
teaching them how to manage the ill will of his half-brother, Enlil. Enki demands the people resist by not praying to their goddess,
Rochester,
Iska-Adad, to prevent rain on the crops. Enki's intercession again works, but only temporarily. In his multi-pronged assault on humanity, Enlil persists. He sends other diseases to silence them. Humanity was afflicted with sickness, headaches, Shurupu, and Asaku diseases. Nisaba turned away from her breast as the yield of the field decreased, as the dark fields turned white, as the broad countryside bred alkali, the earth clamped down her teats. Nothing sprouted, no grain grew. A baby could not get out of the womb because it was too tight. The people were inflicted with Asaku. By the end of the second year, the storehouse was empty. During the third year, the storehouse was still empty. Is this correct? Starvation changed the looks of the people. After the fourth year, their well-set shoulders slouched, their upright shoulders bowed. Often people walked out in public hunched over. As the fifth year approached, her daughter would watch her mother come in. Even a mother would not open her door to her eldest. The eldest daughter would watch the scales at the sale of her mother. When her daughter turned 6, a mother would watch the scales at the sale of her daughter. They served up a daughter as food. They served up a son. Atrahasis again seeks his lord Enki to protect himself and what is left of humankind from the genocidal onslaught that Enlil has brought. This request for help once again leads to conflict between the two brothers. Enlil, unhappy with the destruction and disease he has brought to humanity, orders Enki to manufacture a flood to wipe out the remaining humans. But Enki refuses. The Anunnaki could manipulate the weather with technology like HAARP, but it is not clear in these circumstances that the Anunnaki caused the flood, but by gravitational forces wrought Nibiru's passing Earth, en route to a 3,600-year solar perigee. A tsunami generated by slipping ice sheets at the poles, potentially to wipe out Mesopotamia, was to be kept from man by Enlil. The Anunnaki caused the flood by using a flood weapon, or expecting its arrival based on perturbations in the heavens, but Enlil took credit for it to increase his perceived power to punish. The strange deeds and attitudes specified in the Atrahasis account of Enlil and his crimes against humanity should strike a chord with wrath and vengeance. Because Enki was concerned for his son, Atrahasis, in anticipation of a planned or accidental
it's pretty amazing
he
new
changed the oath he
strat.
was asked to swear to the Anunnaki Council, not to warn humans of the impending floods and disaster. Instead of warning Atrahasis directly, Enki oversees his speech to the wall of the reed hut, where his son has taken refuge. Atrahasis is instructed to build a boat. Listen to me constantly, wall. Reed hut, pay attention to everything I say. Demolish the house, build a boat. Save living things instead of possessions, your boat. Roof it like an apsu, so that the sun cannot see inside. Build upper and lower decks, and the tackle must be robust. Bitumen is thick to provide strength. You will receive rain here. He filled the sand cloth. The amount of sand needed for the flood was 7 nights' worth. As noted previously, it rained for 40 days in Genesis versus 7 days in the Atrahasis. It looks like Enlil is trying to blame Enki for the flood symbolically. In order to achieve this, he changes the rain days number to the same number of days assigned to Enki, i.e. 40. It would be uncharacteristic of the brothers to act in this manner. Either way, Atrahasis is the real nautical savior of humankind, the biblical Noah. King Shurupak was 600 years old and served as a medical center for Ninhursag, Nintu, Beletli, Mami, many names for her. She later became known as Isis in Egypt. Atrahasis recounted the tale people left behind would buy once he left their beloved city. According to him, Enki and Enlil were at odds, and since the city was in Enlil's region, Mesopotamia, it would be best to leave the region and go to Africa, Apsu, to find safety in Enki's domain. We can find a very detailed account of Noah's Ark on the tablets, complete with full-blown Sumerian details. According to many cultures, the Great Flood occurred at the end of the last ice age, approximately 11,000 BCE. With the aid of an Anunnaki pilot Enki had placed on board the vessel, Atrahasis landed on the highest mountain peak in the area, Mount Ararat, following the flood. The Anunnaki spotted Atrahasis' boat from their airborne craft, and the Anunnaki landed on Mount Ararat to investigate the matter further. Enlil saw the boat and was furious with the Gyges. The mighty Anuna agreed together on oath. No form of life should have escaped. How did anyone survive the catastrophe? Enki shouted to the mighty gods, I did it in defiance of you. I protected life by making sure it was preserved.
Ah, come
Enki
on.
created humankind from his DNA and rebelled
So I'm
against
trying to
his
get
brother
ammo
Enlil's
from that.
genocidal order to wipe
Those
out the
guards,
primitive workers,
right?
saving his son Atrahasis from the flood that wiped out the Mesopotamian civilization.
Well, ideally I
Here is
want to
the
get
story
the
in black
ammo
and white.
from
Okay, baked clay to start with.
the...
Enki created humanity from his genes and rebelled against an order by his brother Enlil to wipe out the primitive workers, saving his son Atrahasis from the massive flood that decimated the Sumerian
this guy,
civilization. Primitive worker.
This guy?
According to the Atrahasis, if the primitive workers received intelligence from one of the Gyges, what would prevent the humans from exercising their intelligence?
But I keep missing him. So, my last resort is the boost.
The Anunnaki designed primitive humans as enslaved people, intending to control, manage them for mining and construction work, stating in the Atrahasis that intelligence was built in as part of their design.
But I end up with 20 bullets
One is not making a
sometimes
robot
randomly.
with a limited command set, which creates a challenge for the creator. An entity with intelligence can gain a sense of self, or a center of gravity instead. In the end, this will lead to rebellion and independence. The Anunnaki and the Gyges were confronted with this dilemma, as the Anunnaki in charge needed general labor to build cities and mines. Because of the Gyges, we face the same issue on Earth as we do today. Their primitive consciousness was most likely instilled deliberately at a lower level than the Creator, effectively relegating them to being enslaved workers. Evolution never stops. The primitive worker eventually develops enough self-identity over time, especially if given the intelligence to handle more complex tasks, just like Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Enlil knew that self-consciousness was antithetical to slavery, so he realized Enki had plans to create a workforce like them, a symbol of power. As well as allowing for rapid population growth to meet labor needs, breeding capabilities ensured a productive workforce. Over time on Earth, the Gyges enslaved people became conscious of themselves and revolted against their slave taskmasters, the Anunnaki elite, demanding a replacement slave workforce, e.g. Enki's primitive workers, anatomically modern humans. It took some time for this to happen. The ancient astronauts, who were less accustomed to Earth's shorter solar cycle, may have helped in finding their identity by the difference in time experienced by the Gyges. Shahs are equal to 3,600 years, according to the Gyges. Lord Enki surely knew this, since he intended to jumpstart the evolutionary process that was already underway on Earth. Enki recognized that the seeds of life on Earth came from Nibiru, and Neanderthal humans were present on Earth already, which he mentioned finding in Africa and reporting to the Anunnaki Council. The Anunnaki Council approved the genetic intervention with the local Neanderthal species, since in their minds, that was a way to jumpstart the primitive Earthlings to a higher state of evolution. Neanderthals to the primitive worker, no harm, no foul, right? Because of the dice roll between his brother Enlil and Enki over who would stay in Mesopotamia, Enki was assigned the African gold mining operation. Enki then established himself in the Abzu region of Africa to oversee the gold mining operations. The Anunnaki reportedly faced environmental and atmospheric threats on their planet as well. As a result, the mission to Earth to obtain gold for the anodized layer in the atmosphere was very urgent. Enlil was furious over the subversive tactics and knowledgeable beings that Enki had created, and which Enki marveled at, just as Enki himself was. Enki must have outdone himself playing genetic god, given his lustful reaction to the primitive workers. In Mesopotamia early on, Marduk brags to his son about finding beautiful earthlings bathing in a stream and their encounters with him. Marduk laughs and remarks on Enki's previous reputation with the opposite sex.
Fucking bullshit.
Sarpanet, a mere mortal, was also irresistible to Marduk, who gave up his rights as a god on Nibiru to marry her. Enlil also led a raid on the primitive enslaved people, returning them to Eden. Enlil may not have appreciated Enki's genetic progress, but the enslaved people were helpful for labor needs. For security and control issues for primitive workers, Enki certainly had the bases covered because of the tension between the brothers. According to the initial records, there were also 600 Gyges after they arrived on Earth. The idea of creating an indigenous workforce with a higher level of intelligence than even the Gyges had certainly alarmed Enlil from a command and control standpoint. If the workers were to grow in number, how would he control them? To the small Anunnaki elite present, this would pose a revolutionary threat. Wouldn't a mob of angry miners be able to destroy it quickly? This information is provided to set the context in which Enki persuaded the council to create a primitive
such
workforce.
scam.
Security and control would be the primary concerns. Enki was probably always looking for ways to undermine his brother's facade, hinder his command effectiveness, and antagonize his brother and rightful heir, Commander Enlil. Given the advanced abilities the Anunnaki possessed genetically, one must consider what communication methods they had integrated into their primitive workers so they could be efficiently commanded and controlled. Communication methods were necessary to control large numbers of enslaved people. The commands were related to assigned group tasks, such as pulling a rope in unison. What would one do with a slave worker who suddenly stopped communicating? It would be too risky. Thoth is the son of Enki, the creator. He advocated for humankind to become sons of God through awakening their energy bodies, chakras, and consequent consciousness, which he designed to be sensitive to the various frequencies associated with the radial distance and frequencies caused by a spherical resonator, such as the Earth. Those who read the Emerald Tablets can get a sense of the advanced energy knowledge Thoth possessed. As evidenced by his staff, he was an expert geneticist, the Caduceus. A function of human consciousness connected to DNA was the knowledge of energy matter and the pineal gland. Noah, Gilgamesh, and eternal life. Gilgamesh's epic is the most extensive literary composition written in Akkadian cuneiform script. In the ancient world, King Gilgamesh is known for his famed quest for immortality, a quest that has become a worldwide recognizable theme. In present-day southern Iraq, the narration follows the heroic king of the Sumerian city of Uruk. The Anunnaki gods ordained kingship, the only form of early governorship in Mesopotamia. A king was an exemplary shepherd, maintaining order, military leadership, and security, and performing priestly functions such as creating laws and conducting large-scale building projects. He also served as the link between the gods and the people. In ancient times, kings were likely demigods, a hybrid mix of pure Niburian blood and the genetics diluted for the slave species Adapa. According to the Sumerian king's list, Lugalbanda, the shepherd king, ruled Uruk for 1,200 years. An ancient Sumerian text describes a romantic relationship between Lugalbanda and Ninsun, a full-blooded Anunnaki goddess. In Gilgamesh and Huwawa, the hero consistently says, "Under my mother, Ninsun, and my father, holy Lugalbanda." King Gilgamesh was therefore three-quarters pure Anunnaki blood. Gilgamesh may have been the king and father of Lugalbanda, but he was merely a human. Ninsun, as a full-blooded Anunnaki female, would contribute mitochondrial DNA to her offspring, making 344 Anunnaki. According to Niburian inheritance rules, the rightful heir will be born from the father and his half-sister, perpetuating the dominating effects of mitochondrial DNA. The table below depicts the first dynasty kings of Uruk. The lineage data shows Gilgamesh did not follow in direct succession after his father, Lugalbanda, even though he was king circa 2600 BCE and ruled for 126 years. He succeeded Dumuzi, a son of Enki. Unug was defeated and the throne was given to Urim, In the late 2nd millennium BCE, many tablets relating to the Gilgamesh epic were found throughout the Middle East. Some tablets were found in Megiddo, written in Akkadian, while others were in Emar along the mid-Euphrates. There are versions in Akkadian, Hittite, and Hurrian, discussed in Hattusa, the capital of the Hittites in northern Anatolia. Nineveh was discovered in the 7th century during the Kassite kingship of Sennacherib. There is no record of the origin of the famous epic, but it presents the contemporary gods of Mesopotamia in the same way as the Atrahasis, including the members of the Anunnaki Council, Enlil, Enki, and Anu. During his reign as king, Gilgamesh knew humans created by Enki had a limited lifespan of only 120 years. For centuries, Gilgamesh's heroic and emotionally charged quest for eternal life appealed to the audiences in the entire region, just as it did to his Anunnaki predecessors. The sensitive king grieved over the loss of life and dreaded his death as a genetically defective individual, as evidenced by the long lives of the lucky king in Genesis 4 and the many deeds he performed in ancient Mesopotamia. Demigods like the lucky king probably lived much longer than 120 years. Anunnaki was partaking of life-prolonging starfire gold to mitigate the effects of the rapid solar cycles experienced on Earth to prevent the degradation of telomeres. Therefore, the Anunnaki appeared immortal or to have everlasting life. It does not appear that King Gilgamesh had access to the same life-prolonging luxury. Because
Maybe I
of his
just have to
diluted
pass the
Anunnaki
guy away
blood,
with a
Gilgamesh
PP7,
knew he
honestly.
would not have the same eternal lifespan as Ninsun, his
As
mother.
I get up the hallway,
Gilgamesh yearns for eternal life.
maybe I just gotta
The perks
pass
of
him
being
away
king are many.
with the
Gilgamesh
PP7.
had access to otherwise forbidden knowledge
why
kept by
not?
astronauts in his backyard of Uruk, which must have been tantalizing for him. Inanna and Anu both had temples in Uruk. Anunnaki guarded the MEs, which were reported to number 94 in total. The information stored on ME tablets likely contained details about genetics and related to what appeared to be eternal lifespans for the gods. From this information, ancient astronauts developed civilization on a distant planet. Gilgamesh was well aware of the role genetics play in a long life,
insane.
as evidenced by the longevity of the Anunnaki enshrined as gods and deified in Mesopotamia, and sought to obtain it for himself. Ziusudra, aka Atrahasis, Noah, and his family landed on Mount Ararat aboard the Ark, instructed by Enki, following the last apocalyptic deluge to hit Mesopotamia. As Enlil soared aloft with several other Anunnaki key figures surveying flood damage, he spotted Ziusudra and his Ark. He was furious that some humans had survived the catastrophe. The truth of his bloodline was revealed to Ziusudra later that evening, while he conducted an offering at an impromptu altar he built on site. Ziusudra's father was Enki, saving him from the destructive deluge. Ziusudra, who was only 50% pure in his Anunnaki lineage, was given eternal life during that meeting with Enlil. It is not completely clear what transpired on the mountain, but according to the Anunnaki writings, most likely it involved a council decision to provide access to a specific plant of life for the transformed and newly renamed Anunnaki club member, Utnapishtim. Anu visits Adapa in heaven. A Nuburian host offered the bread of life and elixir to the enslaved mortal Adapa when Dumuzi and Ningishzida led them to meet Anu in heaven, Nibiru, as part of the ritual encounter. Adapa refused the bread and the elixir, following Enki's instructions. More than likely, these concoctions restored the DNA of the Anunnaki, perpetuating the natural renewal process. Considering the rapid aging of the Anunnaki, who worked in Africa's mines for long periods, the renewed process appears to have been copied or re-engineered on Earth. Gilgamesh sought a plant that would produce the same life-extending effects. After failing in his attempt to meet the gods, who were seen taking off and landing rockets on the massive stone platforms at Baalbek, Lebanon, King Gilgamesh devised a plan to find Enki's son. Gilgamesh could discover the secret given to him by Enlil atop Mount Ararat and achieve eternal life for himself if he could find the king of Shuruppak, known as Ziusudra, to the Sumerians, and Noah, to the readers of the canonical Bible. Ziusudra, aka Noah, was renamed Utnapishtim, following his changed longevity status, and allowed into God's private club on Mount Ararat. Gilgamesh had 75% pure Anunnaki blood. Ziusudra, however, only had 50%. Thus it seemed only fair that Ninsun's son, Gilgamesh, should be treated the same way. About 2600 BCE, this is the catalyst for Gilgamesh's epic tale and the background situation in Uruk. Noah meets Gilgamesh. King Gilgamesh finds the mighty flood exile Utnapishtim in his quest and gets him to reveal the location of the plant of life he seeks, which is harvested in the shallow waters of the ocean. Gilgamesh Epic Tablet 11. Gilgamesh spoke to him, to Utnapishtim, the far off. Gilgamesh looked at Utnapishtim. Furthermore, your limbs are precisely the same as mine. You are not different from me at all. Utnapishtim spoke to him, to Gilgamesh, saying, I feel the urge to prove myself against you. Gilgamesh, let me reveal to you a secret that has been kept for a long time. From this point on, Noah tells Gilgamesh a detailed account of what happened before, during, and after the apocalyptic flood. Compare this account in Genesis 7-9. This is a comprehensive account of humankind's origins. Gilgamesh Epic
I've heard
Tablet
that.
11. You know Shuruppak, a city in the Euphrates. When the most powerful gods caused a flood in that city, it was already old. Their father, Anu, was there. The warrior Enlil served as their counselor, Ninurta as their chamberlain, Anuji as their canal controller.
Maybe I should shoot that guy as I push the console. Maybe I should take that guy's gun.
He repeated their speech to a reed hut. Man of Shuruppak, son of Ubara Tutu, dismantle your house and build a boat. Reed hut, brick wall, listen to me, reed hut, and pay attention. Rather than possessions, look for living things. Save lives by rejecting
the
cattle.
stone off. Yeah,
Put the
I heard
seeds of
that
all living
too.
things in the boat.
You're
When I
really
realized and
hammering the
spoke with my
Muslims
master
tonight,
ear,
man.
My master, I have listened to the words you spoke in this way, and I will act accordingly. How can I explain myself to
I know
the
what you're
city,
saying,
to the
though.
men and the elders? Elders?
Like
elders?
history.
Ea, Enki, spoke up and said, I, his servant, was told to speak to them. Elil has rejected me, so I cannot stay in your city. Additionally, I cannot set foot on Elil's land again. My master Ea must stay
Thanks,
with me
man.
in Apsu.
I'm glad you give me
According
praise
to this
like that.
tablet 11 snippet, Utnapishtim attributes his fate to Enki, who warned him about the impending flood, and Enlil, who blessed him with eternal life. Gilgamesh travels home with his prized prize plant by sea, after hunting for the heralded life plant with Utnapishtim and
A
Uruk's
harem?
king. Considering the symbols alluded to in the
No.
epic, those officially attributed
I'm a
to
faithful
Enki,
man.
Lord of the Waters, Gilgamesh
One
is
woman,
taken
one
away
love.
with the plant. In Enki's original genetic design, humankind was restricted to a finite lifespan of 120
Sorry, man, I'm
years.
just being an idiot.
Gilgamesh was more than likely to live beyond the mortal lifespan limit, yet his destiny was not to be immortal like Noah and the gods. 2 demigods perished here on earth, heroes of old, men of renown described in the Hebrew-edited version of the Bible.
Oh
New
my god, did you see that?
International Version.
That was
Alexander the
insane.
Great of Macedonia,
Such a scam.
a similar old hero, suffered the same consequences as Gilgamesh. Genesis. In those days and afterward, the Nephilim lived on earth when the sons of God had married men's daughters and had children by them. They were the heroes of the past, the men of renown. Gilgamesh's mother, Ninsun, would be an excellent candidate to study the Anunnaki genealogy, since she came from a pure bloodline. Her mother was an ancient hero, a king of renown and fame. Genesis. As the father of Nimrod, Cush was a mighty warrior on earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Because of this, it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. His first centers of power were Babylon, Erech, Uruk, Akkad, and Calneh in Shinar, Sumer. Sitchin dreamed of genetically analyzing an ancient astronaut's body from Nibiru. The discoveries would validate his theories about the Sumerian gods,
Toast.
correlating our missing link origins with the archetypal entwined serpent strands of Anunnaki DNA. Perhaps the junk DNA of the primitive workers, which 95% of it has been deemed useless by scientific research, was the original Anunnaki DNA that had been inactivated. When comparing the original Anunnaki DNA with human DNA, any doubts regarding the Anunnaki origins of humanity would likely be dispelled. The DNA analysis has long been accomplished, as grave sites have been unearthed and physical anthropology has focused on the Sumer region since the century. Its outcomes are unknown to most people. The district of Iana and the district of Anu were the temple complexes of Uruk, both dedicated to the Anunnaki gods and
I gotta
council
watch
chambers
my
Inanna and
PB.
Anu,
How
respectively.
did I have so much ammo?
As one
I
of the
must have got
oldest
it
and
from
most
the
noteworthy cities in Sumer,
from the
Eridu
mine
was
boost
in the Anu
k-
district.
passing away the guard.
Besides their religious functions, temples were also used for state functions. Uruk's impressive temples are home to living beings who regularly visit and live there. It is even more enjoyable to read Gilgamesh's story because of his direct knowledge and interaction with Inanna and Anu. It is said that Saddam Hussein's desire to rebuild Babylon, Marduk's gateway of the gods, was motivated by his belief that he was a reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar. During the First Gulf War, he hired a team of Germans to run a magnetometer over the ancient site of Uruk. A massive bypass canal was built to divert the water where the famous reeds grew, away from the Uruk area, to access the site. The canal dried the area, allowing archaeologists to access the site. Compared to being overthrown by the world's most powerful military,
Oh, at least I wanted to see.
this
Just
archaeological
give me a peek, man.
activity seems illogical. William Henry is an independent archaeologist who argues that the old ET influence in Sumer and the US focus on Saddam Hussein is William Henry. Henry's central thesis is that a stargate used the Anunnaki Nephilim to travel between
Oh,
Earth
wow,
and
nice,
Nibiru
man.
in Sumerian times. Using Sitchin's interpretation of a cuneiform tablet of an Uruk ritual text, Henry describes the following scene. Images have been found that depict divine beings flanking a temple entrance and holding poles to which ring-like objects are attached. The divine nature of the scene is revealed by the sun and moon symbols depicting Enlil and Enki flanking, a gateway through which Anu is entering. Gilgamesh,
insane.
the famous
Come
king
on.
of the Epic of Gilgamesh, was born in this ancient city of the Sumerian
Oh,
civilization.
that stupid
Anu and his
fucking
two sons,
kneeling
Enlil and
motherfucker,
Enki,
man.
were the Anunnaki of the
Come
Sumerians.
on, man.
Henry proposes that the above scene depicts the elite Anunnaki's transport device. It is most likely that such a device exists in Uruk, the Sumerian city. Would this explain Saddam Hussein's interest in mapping the city of Uruk? Saddam had a secret agenda involving Sumerian artifacts, and we may never know the truth, lest Anu or some other high-ranking Anunnaki reactivate the portal in Uruk or Jerusalem with news media crews present and introduce themselves to the world via some talk show. Zoroaster's winged disc god. Over 1,000 years ago, in ancient Persia, a religious philosopher named Zoroaster simplified the pantheon of early Iranian gods into two opposing forces: Ahura Mazda, illuminating wisdom, and Angra Mainyu, destructive spirit. Zoroaster's ideas have influenced many religions throughout history, including Judaism, Gnosticism, Christianity, and Islam.
Oh my god, I actually
A stone
turned.
inscription on
Did
the
you see
cliffs
that?
of Behistun in modern-day Iran depicts the deity Ahura Mazda flying in the winged
That was
disc of
insane.
King Darius I.
I've never done that before.
This is the same symbol used by Enki and the flying disc symbol on the old Persian capital of Persepolis. According to Wikipedia, the inscription was authored by Darius the Great between his inauguration as king of the Persian kingdom in 522
That's what they
BC
usually do.
and his death in 486 BC. Darius's autobiography, including his ancestry and lineage, begins the inscription. Darius later recounts a lengthy account of events following the deaths of Cyrus the Great and Cambyses II, in which he won 19 battles in 1 year, finishing in December 521 BC,
I know
to
a
put
Cyrus
down
the
multiple
Great.
rebellions across the Persian Empire. According to the inscription, the rebellions around the time of Cyrus's death and that of his son Cambyses II were orchestrated by several impostors and their co-conspirators in various cities throughout the empire, who falsely declared themselves kings. During this period of upheaval, Darius the Great declared himself triumphant in all battles, attributing his success to the grace of Ahura Mazda. The Zoroastrian religion describes Ahura Mazda as the creator of God of light and wisdom. Angra Mainyu, the creator of all destruction, was his arch-rival. Readers should be shocked to learn that Ahura Mazda was Enki, and his half-brother Enlil played the role of the demon destroyer, the precursor of the Christian devil, Angra Mainyu. As a result, the Christian devil portrayed himself as God and demonized the actual creator, Ahura Mazda, as Satan or a snake. The latter biblical canon reflects the influence of Isis. For centuries, Zoroastrian served as many Iranians' national or state religion. Invasion by Alexander the Great led to the collapse of the Achaemenid Empire. With the decline of the Sassanid Empire in the 7th century, Islam further marginalized.
Yo, Toad and
The new
Moonraker,
state
you want to hear
religion in
something
Persia
funny?
is Allah's Islam instead of
So you know that
Ahura
job
Mazda's
that I quit?
Zoroastrianism. It was not long before
Tomorrow
the Enlilites rooted the remnants
is
of their
Truth and
nemesis
Reconciliation
Enkiites from
Day,
Mesopotamia after the
which is their
Mesopotamian territory had been
their
assigned to Enlil. Various Middle Eastern countries,
giving
including Iran,
thoughts
Turkey,
and prayers
Syria,
for the
display
Native
crescent moon
Americans that
adorned
were
flags,
passed away.
showing that Enlilites are gaining strength.
But anyways,
As the Chaldean
it's a
dynasty took over much of their
the
northern
government is
relatives'
shut
empire,
down,
Babylon
so
enjoyed
there's
a
no
brief but
work,
influential
and
period
it's
of
an
power and influence.
unpaid
The last king of
holiday.
Babylon, the Assyrian-born Nabonidus, paid
The
scant
fucking
attention to
government
politics, preferring to obsess over the
convinced
worship of the
them
moon god and leaving the day-to-day
to pay
administration
them
for his son
one less day
Belshazzar. Good
of
Allah
work
be Nana
during the
Sin,
year
Enlil's son, and thus the god
because
of
of
the
these
crescent moon.
fucking
Since the Mesopotamian territory belonged
these
to the
ghost
Enlil, his descendants,
Indians,
including the
these
moon
Indian
god Nana,
ghosts.
would have been welcomed there. In 3760
Can you believe
BCE,
it?
Nana was also a member of the council.
And they probably
of the
accepted
Anunnaki.
it because they have a
He is
day
the one
off,
who led the
but it's
Gyges miners'
unpaid.
rebellion in Africa under
In the
Enlil's
end, the
supervision,
government
as
is
evidenced in the Atrahasis.
the
According to
money and
historical
give it to them.
sources, Nana Sin's cult centers
I
were
know,
prolific
yeah,
in
you're
southern
right.
Iraq to
But
Syria,
you know
Turkey
why?
to
We're
Iran.
fucking...
One of the most sacred centers of Islam
Yeah.
is Mecca, Saudi Arabia, and the Kaaba
Dude.
stone was initially dedicated to Allah, the moon god. Nana Sin might be the god
The
Muhammad
person?
met in the wilderness. Was
Literally,
Nana Sin Allah?
the
Let us
person that
recall
came
what
up with that
Atrahasis says.
just saved the
Atrahasis'
government. I don't
tablet,
know how
when
many...
Allah made his voice heard.
What's like
spoke to his
52
brother's
times
God.
5?
We must
I
carry
don't know. Let's do
Elim.
like 50
From
times
his
5.
dwelling, the counselor of
250
gods,
days.
the warrior, cry
250
battle now.
work days.
After hearing his speech, the gods
They
set
just
fire to their
reduced
tools. They put aside their spades of fire,
The
their
government's
loads for the
pay
fire god, and they flared up.
by 1
According to the
250th.
author, Allah leads the rebellion to his father's
like
residence,
25%?
Enlil. Ichigai
Is it like
Minus was stirred up by his
0.25%?
fiery rhetoric. It mirrors the behavior of the followers of jihad in the Middle East.
Not
Spiritual leaders
insignificant. Probably
encouraging
paid that
warlike
guy's salary.
activities from followers affiliated with the moon god Allah. Nina, also known as Sin, was the moon god,
Right.
son of
All
Enlil
for a
and
lie.
Ninno, father of Utu, sun god, and Inanna.
Sham.
According to genealogy tables and Sumerian records, Enlil
I just
had
find it
Nana's Sin's
hilarious.
son on the Anunnaki Council. This book aims not to prove that Allah
I don't
referred
find
to
like
in the
the
Atrahasis as
native
the same god worshipped
suffering
by Muslims
hilarious.
today.
I find
However, it would be an exciting
these
research
people
project for
support
those
it,
inclined to
and
seek
in
the
the
truth.
end,
What would the
they
results
just
of such a study
lose
be like
money.
today? After
It's
learning
just so
that Enlil
ridiculous.
was the god of Abraham,
It's just
Isaac,
too
and
much.
Jacob, the god who
It
killed
does
the
nothing
enslaved
for
people
natives.
of
It does
Mesopotamia,
absolutely nothing for
and the god who
natives.
created the great flood to wipe out all the Nephilim on earth.
It literally does nothing.
Mankind lived in
People
paradise
that
for a
have
long
day
time.
off, go to the casino
God
or
said to
something.
unnamed colleagues, "Is it possible that he may also take from the tree of life and live forever? Having eaten the fruit of knowledge, but forbidden from reaching for the fruit of the tree of life,
I want to fucking smoke a
following
big
Adam's eating of the
bag
fruit of
of
knowledge.
cigarettes.
Since
better
then,
stop
man
talking.
has sought immortality withheld by God. Yet, throughout the millennia, it has gone unnoticed
too much,
that
man.
while concerning
The
Yahweh's
unpaid
tree
holiday.
of knowing, Adam became a part of us after eating it.
Thinking about Native
No such
Indians, an
statement has been
unpaid
made
holiday.
regarding from the fruit
It's
of the
just
tree
too
of
much,
life
man.
we can live forever. Was
This is
it because the promise of
Canadian government.
immortality made to mankind has a distinctive attribute of the gods, was nothing more than a grand illusion?
It's just too much.
A king of Uruk, Gilgamesh, son of Ninsun and Lugalbanda,
ridiculous,
was the
man.
first to try and find out. While the tales of Enmerkar and Lugalbanda are enchanting and intriguing,
One sec.
the post-diluvial Luga has to be one of the most compelling. Gilgamesh was the demigod who ruled Uruk from 2750
kinda sounds
to
like Carl Jobs.
2600 BCE, and had the longest and most detailed records. Throughout Gilgamesh's long epic, he searches for immortality, believing that since 2/3 of him are gods and 1/3 are humans, he should not peer over the wall as a mortal. Genealogically, he was more than just a demigod, more than a 50-50 god. King Lugalbanda, son of Lenana and high priest of Uruk, possessed the divine determinative. Gilgamesh was described as having the essence of Ninurta, Enlil's foremost son, because of his mother, Nin. Sun, lady who irrigates, was the daughter of Ninurta and his spouse, Batu. Anu's youngest daughter, Bau, was of a noble family. Gilgamesh's genealogy was not complete. Scholars have called Utu Shamash Gilgamesh's godfather since he was born in the presence of Utu, twin brother of Inanna and grandson of Enlil. Moreover, Gish-bil-Ga-Mesh, his full theophoric name, was also welcomed by the Enkyites because it linked him to Gerbil, a son of Enki and the god of metal foundries. According to a version of the Epic of Gilgamesh in Hittite, he was lofty and endowed with a superhuman size. Attributes undoubtedly inherited not from the father, King Shorty, but from the mother, since Ninsun's mother, the goddess Bau, was true to her nickname, Gula, plain and simple, the Big One. Several gods had gifted him with talents and prowess. Tall, muscular and shapely, Gilgamesh had been compared to a wild bull. Bold and untamed in spirit, he constantly wrestled with the city's youths, which he always won. After Gilgamesh started to demand first rites with brides on their wedding night, the city's elders appealed to the gods to stop him from leaving no maiden alone. Enki-Du, and Enki created, Gilgamesh's double, was designed to walk in the shadow of Gilgamesh and force him to change his ways. A city's elders realize they have an uncouth primitive who eats raw food and is friends with animals, so they place him outside of town with a harlot to learn the ways of man. She also cleaned and clothed him and curled his hair, so that when he finally entered the town, he looked just like Gilgamesh. In response to an incredulous Gilgamesh's wrestling call, Enkidu wrestled him down and taught him humility. They became inseparable comrades. Gilgamesh began to ponder the questions of aging and life and death after losing his haughtiness and prowess. In my city, man dies. My heart is oppressed. Man perishes. My heart is heavy. Godfather, Gilgamesh told Utu, will I also peer over the wall? Will my fate be like this? He asked. His mentor's response did not encourage him. What's the point of roving about, Gilgamesh? The life that you seek will not be found. God created mankind, but he left it in a state of sin. Mankind was assigned death, and enduring life they kept for themselves. Utu Shamash advised Gilgamesh to live day by day and enjoy life, but many dreams and omens convinced him that he could avoid the end of a mortal if he joined the gods in their heavenly abode. Enkidu, he learned, knew how to reach the Anunnaki landing place in the cedar forest, a great platform with a launch tower that served as the Earth terminal for the Igigi. Igigi took Gilgamesh aloft from there, and Gilgamesh asked his mother for advice and help. When Enkidu warned Gilgamesh of the monster Huwawa guarding the place, and told Gilgamesh that only gods can scale the heavens, and only gods live forever under the sun, Gilgamesh replied with words that still resonate today. In the case of mankind, their days are numbered. Whatever they achieve is but a fleeting wind. I will go there first. I urge you to shout, advance, fear not, and should I fall, please help me up. A name will have been given to me. Their response will be Gilgamesh. Huwawa has been defeated against fierce opposition. Seeing that Gilgamesh was undeterred, Ninsun, his mother, pleaded with Utu Shamash to give Gilgamesh extra protection.
Is that Randy
Ninsun was
Is
wise
that
and wise in all
Randy
ways,
Savage?
and she was also practical. She made Enkidu swear that he would protect Gilgamesh bodily. To ensure his loyalty,
Can you imagine
she
getting
gave
an
him an offer
unpaid
that no one could
holiday
ever
for
refuse.
Indians? Like not
goddess
like
with a young
Indians
wife.
from India. I mean like
Tablet
Native
4, line
Americans.
5,
The
partly
Truth
damaged.
and Reconciliation Day.
In the epic,
Unpaid
Ninsun
holiday.
discusses which one of his daughters should
Losing
be
like
the bride
hundreds of
with Haya,
dollars or
the spouse of
whatever
Ut
dollars.
Shamash.
It's too much.
By the time Gilgamesh and Enkidu arrived at Cedar Mountain, Utu Shamash had given them divine sandals that enabled them to reach the mountain in a fraction of the time, and they began their adventure. Despite the lack of a map alongside the ancient text, it is clear where the comrades were heading. There is only one cedar forest in the Near East and Asia, in the mountains of Lebanon where the gods' landing place was located. While reaching the mountain range, the comrades were awed by the majestic cedar trees
It's
and
fucking
camped for
5
the night
a.m.
at
there,
the
bro.
foot of the forest. However, during the night, Gilgamesh was awoken by the shaking of the ground and was able to see a sky chamber taking off. The vision that Gilgamesh saw was truly awesome. Though the sun was rising, darkness descended. Flames erupted. It rained death as the sky swelled. All that was fallen turned to ashes as the glow of the fire faded.
Why?
As Gilgamesh saw and
Why?
heard the rocket ship launch, he knew they had reached the landing place of the gods. At dawn, the
I might just
comrades
play
sought the
facility
entrance, making
agent
sure
for the rest
not
of the
to
stream,
walk through.
honestly.
Weapon trees that kill. A coin from a much later time shows the site with a rocket on the platform. Enkidu found the gate, but was thrown back when he attempted to open it. He lay paralyzed for 12 days. As soon as he could speak and move again, he begged Gilgamesh to give up trying to open the gate. Gilgamesh had good news, however. He had found a tunnel while Enkidu was immobilized. It might take him straight to the command center of the Anunnaki. A tunnel seemed to be the best way for Enkidu to chat. Trees and bushes overgrew the tunnel entrance, blocked by soil and rocks. As the comrades began to get rid of everything, The guardian of the place, Huwawa, became angry when he heard the sounds. He had the teeth of a dragon, the face of a lion, and came as a flood. His most fearsome feature was his radiant beam, emanating from his forehead. This devoured trees and bushes. None could escape its fatal. The comrades had no way out when Utu Shamash spoke to Chem. The king told them not to run away from Huwawa. Instead, let him get close to them and throw dust at him. Following the advice of the comrades, Huwawa was immobilized. The monster was knocked to the ground by Enkidu. Enkidu then put to death.
As long as the 69.
Having gained access to the secret abode of
Day
the
of the year is always
Anunnaki,
a paid
the
holiday.
companions relaxed and savored their victory. Taking a bath and refreshing himself, Gilgamesh took off his cloak by the stream. They were unaware that the goddess Inanna was watching the entire event from her sky chamber. Inanna was attracted to the king's powerful physique as she addressed him. "Become my lover, Gilgamesh. Please give me the fruits of your love. I'll take you as my man. You shall have me as your wife." Gilgamesh was sure that Inanna would entice him with offers of a golden chariot, a
public
magnificent
holidays in
palace,
Australia
and
are
lordship
unpaid.
over other kings and princes. But he reminded her that what she promised him, a goddess, was nothing, and that as to love, where did her former lovers end?
Interesting.
Gilgamesh describes how Inanna tossed them away one
Sounds
after
like a scam
another,
to me.
as if a shoe pinching its owner's foot. The bull of Anu, the bull of heaven, who roamed in the cedar mountain, occurred to Gilgamesh to insult her. Inanna was angry at being rebuffed. She complained to Anu and asked him to let loose on the bull. Inanna insisted that Anu let the beast open, despite warnings from Anu that its release would lead to 7 years of famine.
This is the run.
As Gilgamesh and Enkidu fled, they forgot about the tunnel and landing place.
Fucking kneeling.
They covered a distance of 1 month and 15 days in 3 days using Utu's sandals. Gilgamesh rushed to Uruk to mobilize the fighting force. Enkidu faced the monster outside the city walls. Hundreds of fighters fell into a pit when the Bull of Heaven snorted. As the Bull of Heaven turned to face Enkidu, he struck it from behind, killing it. Inanna to Anu initially remained speechless, demanding that the slayers of Huwawa and the Bull of Heaven be put on trial. A cylinder seal depicts an ancient artist depicting Enkidu gloating over the slain Bull of Heaven, and a winged disc symbolizes Inanna addressing
all public holidays are paid. Oh, nice.
The gods' views differed after deliberating. Enlil said that Gilgamesh did not kill Enkidu, only let him die. He let both Enkidu and Gilgamesh die after he had slain Huwawa and the Bull of Heaven. Utu said no one should die because his comrades were attacked by the monsters. The land of mines was the punishment for Enkidu. Gilgamesh was spared.
I think for employee, salary people, it might be paid tomorrow.
Celestial abode, even though his attempt at
maybe
the Cedar
not,
Forest
but
had failed.
Since the government
New landing
pays contractors
and facilities were constructed
with that
in the
shitty
sacred
manpower,
fourth region of Mun,
shirtless Aussie group,
missiles in the Sinai Peninsula.
They don't have any rights. They have less human rights. The government outsourced human rights.
The pre-diluvial landing platform was created in
to
the
the
Lebanon
lowest
mountains.
bidder.
2 great pyramids were built in Egypt as guidance
And
beacons,
said, well, that's
and
capitalism.
a new mission control center was built in Jerusalem. In addition to the landing place in the north, the spaceport was where the gods ascend and descend.
Never you mind.
Tilmun was a forbidden zone for mortals, but Gilgamesh thought he might be exempt from prohibition because Utnapishtim, Ziusudra, the person who is famous for the deluge, was taken there. A second attempt at immortality was conceived by Gilgamesh due to his plan. To avoid losing Enkidu, Gilgamesh came up with an idea.
Aussie girls
Let him sail to the land of mines while en route to Tilmun, and he will drop Enkidu off there. Ninsun appealed once more, and Utu once again gave grudging assistance. So it was, as
No, I
their
think they
ship
call each other
made its
mates
way
'cause
through
they're
the
all,
narrow
like,
strait
mates.
leading out of the Persian Gulf,
As in
now called
intercourse.
the Gulf of Oman, that the comrades were still alive and together. There was a watchtower on the shore at the Narrows.
Heterosexual way.
Using a beam similar to Huwawa's, a watchman questioned them. Uneasy, Enkidu cried, "Let's return."
I'm on fire tonight.
Gilgamesh replied, "Onward." The ship's sails were torn and overturned by a sudden
Just in
wind,
my
hurled by the
ridiculous
watchman's beam.
jokes, did you absorb this? I
Enkidu's
know.
floating body was
Thanks,
discovered
man.
by
I don't know,
Gilgamesh in
man.
the still
I'm just
darkness of the
fucking
depths,
not
and he dragged
planning
it
it.
to shore, hoping
not-
for a miracle.
I'm not trying to do anything.
Until a
I'm
worm
just trying to
was
get fucking
coming out of
59 here,
Enkidu's
man.
nostrils, he sat by his fallen comrade and mourned him day and night.
Thanks, Silver.
Gilgamesh wandered aimlessly
I think
through
this
the
is.
wilderness,
I've
alone,
like
lost and
accepted
despondent.
Clown World.
When I die, shall I not be
I've
as
this
Enkidu?
is like
He asked.
this is like the
After making the
it's like
decision,
the start
his
of Act
self-confidence
4
returned,
of the
and he turned to
Shakespearean
Utnapishtim,
play.
son of Ubatutu.
The
He kept heading west,
comedic
guided by the
relief
sun.
from the
moon
fool,
god, Nanar Sin, taught him
from the
at night.
jester in the
In one
beginning of
instance,
Act 4
Gilgamesh
of a
grappled
tragedy.
with 2 desert lions with his bare hands while reaching a mountain pass. The pass was the habitat
I don't know what
of
I'm
desert
talking about. I have
lions.
no fucking idea what I'm talking about.
With their skins, he clothed himself, eating their
Dude, you
flesh
should
as
on
raw meat.
Carlin.
In a low-lying area
His
outside the
last
city,
stand-up,
Gilgamesh
it's pretty
spotted
funny.
an inn,
He's just like
and he
this
began walking
angry
toward it.
old man.
As he approached, Siduri, the alewoman, made a bowl of porridge. But when he wore skins and a lean belly, she was frightened. After a while, she believed that he was a famous king searching for his long-lost ancestor. "Now, alewoman," Gilgamesh asked, "what is Utnapishtim?" He said it was beyond the Salt Sea. "I have never seen a crossing, Gilgamesh. As early as the dawn of time,
We'll put Carlin on
only
tomorrow,
Shamash,
probably during
a
our
violent warrior,
the
crossed the sea.
weightlifting stream.
The crossing was painful.
It's probably
The
we'll
waters
put
of
him
death
on,
that surround
maybe,
it are barren.
if I
The
remember.
paths to them is desolate. Gilgamesh, how are you going to cross the sea? Gilgamesh remained silent without an answer. Siduri continued speaking. A boatman named Ushanabi comes across from time to bring supplies to Utnapishtim from the sea. Just let him see your face. He might be willing to take you across on a log raft. Gilgamesh had to tell him the whole story of his search for immortality, the adventures at the landing place, Enkidu's death, and his wanderings in the wilderness, ending with his encounter with the alewoman, omitting nothing. Like the alewoman, he too was unable to believe Gilgamesh that he had once been the king of Uruk. In order to come and see Utnapishtim, whom they call the Far Away, he wandered across the lands, crossed the mountains, and crossed the seas. The boatman eventually convinced him to proceed in the direction of the Great Sea, which is far away. But he had to take a turn when he reached
1635, that's a
stone
long
markets
time ago.
and go to a town called Uluya in the Hittite version for permission before continuing to Mount Moshe.
That was like
In following the
start
directions,
of
but without spending much
North
time
America.
in Uluya, Gilgamesh
like
proceeded to
Samuel
Mount
de
Moshe,
Champlain.
discovering that it was more than a mountain. Rocket men guard its entrance. The terror in their eyes is
Columbus
unimaginable.
was there
They sweep the mountains with their glaring beams.
30, 40 years
As
before.
Shamash ascends and descends, they watch over him. The illustrations prove it. Upon seeing them,
And wasn't it linked to like the
Gilgamesh's
British
face
system
darkened in fear.
of money?
Gilgamesh was just as surprised as the guards
Did US
as
have
the
its own
rocket
dollar
ball
before
beam swept over him
1776?
with no apparent effect.
I don't know.
As he watched,
I know
he called
nothing
out to
about.
his fellow guard, "The man coming
It's really
towards us
sad.
is
My
the flesh of the
American
gods.
history knowledge is
2/3
very
of him were
small.
gods, and 1/3 were a human. We
They
need
didn't-
to
they
know
didn't
the
teach
reason
it
for your
at
visit,"
all
they
in
asked
Canadian
Gilgamesh,
schools. We don't
regaining
know
his
anything about
composure
American
and
history.
approaching them. The question of death and life was something Gilgamesh wished to ask his forefather Utnapishtim, who took part in the assembly of the gods. Having told him
that
about
Mossad did
Mount
9/11.
Mashu and the underground passageway, the rocket
Most
man
of the
said,
I'm sorry, I love
"There has
you,
never been a
US.
mortal
This
who
wasn't a
achieved
joke
that.
against Americans.
There have never been
It's just
travelers on the
fucking
mountain's
true.
trail. For 12 leagues its interior extends. Darkness is dense, and light does not exist. But Gilgamesh was not deterred, and the rocket man could pass through the gate. After advancing in the tunnel in darkness for 12 double hours, Gilgamesh felt a fresh air breeze only at the 9th hour. A faint light appeared in the 11th hour. After that, he stepped out into bright sunlight and saw an incredible sight, an enclosure of the gods with a garden made entirely of
post-money world.
stones.
People
Among
stealing
its fruits are carnelians, and among its vines
everything
are beautiful
everywhere.
sights. Lapis lazuli is used for its foliage. Of stones are made grapes that are too luscious to look at. It is made from white stones. Reeds made of sosal stones are found in it. Water stones are made similarly to trees of life and trees of Ongu.
What?
As the description continues,
Oh, wow.
Gilgamesh was
You have all
found
the
in an
data, that's
artificial
cool.
Garden of Eden composed entirely of precious stones. He marveled at the sight when he saw the man he had been
16%
searching for,
relative.
the one of the far away. Gazing upon
Still
his
probably
ancestor from millennia
went
ago,
up 4 or 5
Gilgamesh
times
said
or some
these
shit.
words: "Seeing thee, Utnapishtim, I see no difference between thee and
Compared
me.
to like 37 times.
I am you as well, even as I am you." After describing Utnapishtim's search for life and Enkidu's death, he then said, "I would like to know, when in thy search for life, how did you come into contact with the congregation of the gods?" Well, according to Utnapishtim, it was not as simple as that. "Here's how it went," he said. "The Anunnaki, the great gods, once gathered.
God, I'm
The
terrible
maker of
at this
fate,
level, man.
Mamatum. With them,
I have no
fate
idea what I'm
decided
doing. I don't know when to
Shuruppak,
shoot.
a city you
I
are
just
familiar
suck.
with, a city on the Euphrates. The city, as well as the gods within it, were ancient. The lord of pure foresight, Ea, was with the great gods when their hearts led to the deluge. The following words were repeated to me through the reed wall. Man of Shuruppak, son of Ubatutu, demolish the house and build a ship. Live for the present, not for the future. Take the seeds of everything that lives aboard the ship." Utnapishtim described the ship to Gilgamesh and its measurements, and told him that Shurupak's people helped build it because they were told that their god would be rid of his, who was fighting Enlil. Utnapishtim recounts the whole story of the deluge, in which Enlil discovers Ea, Enki's duplicity, and how Enlil, changing his mind, blesses Utnapishtim and his wife to live the life of the gods, as we stand together. Our foreheads were blessed by him. Utnapishtim has been human so far. From now on, he and his wife will be gods. It is far away that Utnapishtim will reside, at the mouth of water streams. Utnapishtim then asked Gilgamesh, "Who shall gather the gods for the sake of thy sake, so that the life that thou seekest may be found by thee?" At that moment, Gilgamesh fainted, lost consciousness and collapsed, realizing that his search for eternal life was in vain, as only the gods in assembly were able to grant eternal life. Utnapishtim and his wife stayed awake for 6 days and 7 nights as Gilgamesh slept. Gilgamesh awoke and was bathed and dressed in clean clothes by Ushabnabi, who helped him return to his city. Gilgamesh was about to leave empty-handed when Utnapishtim stepped forward, pitying him as he did. "What shall I give thee as you return to thy land?" He had a secret of the gods to give him. "Gilgamesh, I address you. I'll reveal a secret. I will tell thee a god's secret. As with the buckthorn, its root is a plant. There are thorns like those on a briar vine. You will have pricked hands, but if thy hands obtain the plant, thou shalt find new life."
I know, it sounds like
Gilgamesh
I'm
was shown
saying
where
this
the
like
rejuvenating
this is
plant
the Carl
grew,
Jobs
according
of
to
the
Utnapishtim.
Sumerian YouTube.
Gilgamesh opened the water pipe as soon as he heard this message.
It's so soothing.
He tied heavy stones to his feet and plunged.
He wasn't
to
the
his
original
knees.
narrator. The
Seeing
original
the
narrator was
plant,
someone else, I
he
think.
grabbed it, cutting the stones from his feet.
'Cause it's
He
been
was
an hour and a
cast
half.
up by
Remember I
the
said it's
shore of
3
the
hours
well.
long?
Overjoyed, Gilgamesh spilled his future plans to the boatman
It's
Ushanabi
epic.
while holding the rejuvenating plant.
It's almost
A
as epic
scene
as
that may have been
Gilgamesh.
depicted on an Assyrian monument. There is a plant here unlike any other, Ushanabi, with which a man can regain his life's breath. The ramparts of Uruk will receive it.
I think I'm just
To
happy,
become
man.
young in old age, I will
I
cause
think
you
I'm
to
just
eat
happy
the
I'm
plant.
not gonna
Man becomes
get an
young
unpaid
in old
holiday
age.
tomorrow.
It shall have the following
Like
name.
like a fucking
I will
fool.
eat from it myself. My youthful state will return to me.
You absolute enemy.
Gilgamesh was confident he had accomplished his goal, so he set out to return to Uruk with Ushanabi. After 20 leagues, Gilgamesh and Ushanabi stopped for a meal.
You are
After
truly
another 30
out
miles,
of this
They
world.
saw a well and stopped for the night. Filling with rejuvenation, Gilgamesh put down the bag with the unique plant to take a refreshing swim. And while he wasn't looking, it began to bloom. The serpent smelled the plant's scent. The plant was carried away from the water by it. Gilgamesh wept as he sat down. Tears ran down his cheeks. Gilgamesh the demigod cried, knowing that fate had robbed him of success once again. One believes
It's like in
that
Perfect
mankind
Dark.
has
Yes,
caught ever
it's still in
since.
In Perfect
For
Dark,
this
they
was
find
the
out that
greatest
E.T.
irony of
is
all.
actually Elvis, but
The serpent
in reality,
invited mankind to
you're
eat
the
the forbidden
E.T.
fruit without fear of death. But it was the
Because
serpent
you're the
who
Anunnaki.
deprived man of the fruit of not dying. Again, was this a metaphor for Enki? The Sumerian king list states that Gilgamesh ruled for 126
And Elvis
years before
is
his
the
son, called
the
Ur-Luga,
humanoid
succeeded him on
that
the
you
throne.
once were before you
His
arrived and
death
took
was even
it
more
over and
mysterious when
educated
came
it
to
with
his
your
burial,
Anunnaki
as
ways.
his life was a puzzle.
And that's why
Even
he's
if man is partly God,
grey
does
and
that
shitty.
mean he is exempt from mortality? His
Talks
death
like an
leaves
idiot.
unanswered this central theme of his tragic story. In ancient times, from Gilgamesh in the 3rd millennium BC up to Alexander the Great, 4th century BC, and to Ponce de Leon, searching for the Fountain of Youth in the 16th century AD, people have striven to avoid, or at least postpone, death.
Okay.
Is this universal and ongoing quest contradictory to what man's creators intended? Is there any evidence that the gods intentionally denied immortality to man in the cuneiform texts and in the Bible?
Oh my god.
The Epic of Gilgamesh gives the following answer, which amounts to a yes. Creating mankind, death for man, the gods allotted everlasting life to themselves, which they kept. When
Why?
Gilgamesh began to learn about life and death matters, his godfather, Utu Shamash, told him about it. And again, after Gilgamesh told Utnapishtim the purpose of his journey,
Wow,
it's
that's
a
fast.
pointless man who cannot escape his mortality, as the whole long tale of Gilgamesh suggests. In rereading the tale, however, the apparent irony in the evident answer is that Gilgamesh's mother told him the way to become immortal was to join the gods on their planet. Then it makes sense why the same Utu Shamash who said forget it, then helped Gilgamesh twice, he tried to ascend and descend the rocket ships. The attempts were in vain because both were unsuccessful. During Gilgamesh's lifetime, the gods told him a secret. Right here on Earth, we have a rejuvenating plant of life. This raises the question of whether the gods themselves were also immortals. Were they also nourished with such a nutrient? In ancient Egypt, the pharaohs believed that they would live forever if they joined the gods on the planet of millions of years. Elaborate preparations were made to facilitate the pharaoh's journey after he died. The king traveled to the Duat in the Sinai Peninsula, beginning with the exit by his car, a kind of afterlife alter ego, from his tomb via a simulated door. A trip to space awaits them there. The Book of the Dead describes underground facilities, rocket pilots, and the breathtaking liftoff of such an underground facility in the Sinai, based on a tomb depiction showing a multi-stage rocket ship similar to the Sumerian Din gear symbol. However, the trip was not just to reside on the god's planet. An ancient Egyptian incantation urged the gods to take this king with them so that he might eat what you eat, drink what you drink, and live on the land you live on. Give Pepi the tree of life on which you are sustained, was the appeal in the pyramid of King Pepi, which was painted on its walls in bright colors. A colorful drawing on the walls showed the king accompanied by his wife arriving in the afterlife at the celestial paradise and sipping the water of life out of which there grows the tree of life. Egyptian representations of the gods' food and water of life are reminiscent of Mesopotamian descriptions of winged gods, eaglemen, flanking the tree of life with a pail of water of life in one hand and the fruit of life in the other. The same notions underlying these depictions are based on Hindu tales of the soma, a plant from the heavens, whose leaves' juice conferred inspiration, vitality, and immortality on those who ate it. All this seems by the biblical take on the subject, which is best known from the tale of the two particular trees in the Garden of Eden, the tree of knowing and the tree of life, whose fruit could make Adam live forever, but notes that a divine effort was made to keep man from eating that fruit. To prevent the earthlings from regaining access to the tree of life, God expelled man from Eden, lest he try, and placed the cherubim and the flaming sword at the east of the Garden of Eden, guarding the way to the tree of life. The Sumerian tale of Adapa depicts the creator trying to prevent man from having divine nourishment. Here we see the creator of man himself, Enki, treating his own earthling son Adapa as follows. The wisdom he had given him, he perfected his understanding. Knowledge had been given to him. He hadn't given him his last life. Then Enki puts his own efforts to the test. Adapa, the child he has with an earthling woman provided to Nibiru by Anu, is offered the food of life and the water of life, but he is warned to avoid them since both are fatal to him. The warning God gave Adam and Eve that eating the fruit of the tree of knowing would result in death turned out to be false. Would Adam also have lived forever if he had eaten from the tree of life? What if God is only concerned with the possibility of their death, but not their death risks? Ve'acha ve'chae le'olam means, and he ate and lived for olam.
I can't.
It is also possible for olam to refer to a geographical place, in which case
go to like Leon's, walk around, IKEA,
in this context,
sit in it.
Olam is the Hebrew name for Nibiru, which is also
Try
the
to find
Hebrew
one on
name
sale.
for the longevity place.
That's
God
what I
was
recommend.
afraid that Adam would acquire Nibiru's life cycle if
IKEA
he ate from the
see
tree of life.
there, yeah.
Everlasting life was deliberately withheld from him
But
when
you gotta
man
make sure
was
it's
created.
comfortable though, man.
So Enki tricks Adapa
saying,
into
like,
not
because
receiving
I
the
did this
divine
once. I
nourishment.
was shopping for a
There
couch
is
once.
no doubt that a food of life
And, like,
exists, but it is not immortality,
Struck
but
Tube.
lasting life.
Have you heard of Struck
Longevity,
Tube? I think they're in
deliberately withheld
Montreal.
from the human race.
They're like a little bit
Although
cheaper.
they may have
Leon's.
similar
Leon's
short-term
is really good.
results, they aren't the same.
The brick has good stuff, but
How long was life of Olam? Life on Nibiru,
the brick
an
probably is the
eternal,
best furniture,
immortal existence,
but they're
or simply a
friggin'
great longevity that on
it's also most
Nibiru is
expensive
measured in
and
Shah units,
sometimes
3,600 times longer than
and
Earth's life. We
the
first
delivery
learned
is
that
a
gods,
nightmare.
or even
Leon's-
demigods, were immortal
Leon's is like
through
the most
Greek
well-rounded.
mythology. The discovery of Canaanite myths at
I bought a
Ugarit
couch.
on Syria's Mediterranean
my
coast
parents
in the
bought
late
me a
1920s revealed where these
sectional
myths
couch
came
from there.
the Canaanites. However, the Anunnaki didn't state that they would never
2017.
die in Mesopotamia.
Still in
Nibiru's
really great
listing of
condition.
earlier generations
It's in the
says,
basement right now.
those were our ancestors who have passed away. Tammuz, the anniversary month of Dumuzi, commemorates the death of Dumuzi, a recorded and
IKEA.
mourned death.
Just gotta make
even
sure
in
you're sitting in it
Jerusalem
and
at
it's
the
comfy,
time of the
man.
prophet Ezekiel. Among the punishments for their crimes, Alalu was sentenced to die in exile. Anzu was executed.
Ew.
Osiris was killed
Oh right,
and
you're a
dismembered by
vegan,
Set.
right?
The god Horus died from a scorpion sting. but was resurrected by
Sorry,
Thoth.
I didn't mean to fucking
When
mock your
Inanna
food.
entered
Sorry,
the
dude.
lower world without permission,
like
she was seized and killed, but later revived by Enki. The Anunnaki did not claim immortality, nor did they claim to be immortal. There was a false sense of immortality created by extreme longevity. As a result, Ninsun encouraged Gilgamesh to go to Nibiru to gain the life of a god, and not just nourish himself with Nibiru's unique nutrients. Otherwise, what purpose did Ninsun have in encouraging him to go there first? Modern science should contemplate an interesting question. Is the extended life cycle longevity on Nibiru, or anywhere else in the universe, an acquired trait or an evolutionary genetic adaptation?
It's too late, I hate you.
According to the statement associated with Adapa, Enki deliberately excluded a gene or genes associated with longevity from the human genome when the genes were mixed. Can it be found? That a key to unlocking these genetic secrets might be available is where our search for gods and demigods is leading. Life spelling. Translations of the Hebrew Bible by the King James Version and those who followed have sought to evoke in the creation stages described in Genesis a sense of divine spirit, a sense of awe in a creator of all. Nibiru/Marduk's wind satellites, the Elohim, breathed the breath of life into Adam's nostrils and gave him a soul. The Spirit of God hovered over the dark chaos. In this book, we have stopped to clarify misconceptions caused by mistranslations and identify instances where the Hebrew is the literal translation of a Sumerian word, helping define the verses word by word. Samuel Noah Kramer, an eminent Sumerian scholar, pointed out that in the tale of creating Eve from Adam's rib, Tsela in Hebrew, the Sumerian word ti actually meant life, as in nin ti, lady life. What was done was to extract the life, DNA, from Adam and manipulate it to produce a female genetic line. When one reads the actual Sumerian text used by Ziusudra to describe Enlil's gift to Gilgamesh, the following instances spring to mind. Ti dingir dim mu unna abede. Zidari dingir dum mu unna abede. How are T and Z different? Life is usually translated as these two Sumerian words. T represents the physical aspects of God, while Z represents the functioning of life. The Sumerian adds dari, duration, to Z to make his point more precise. In addition to physical attributes of godliness, Ziusudra was gifted with durability. Usually, the two lines are translated as life like a god he creates for him, a soul like a god he gives him.
What the fuck?
This is a masterful translation, but it does not capture the exact meaning of the Sumerian writer's skillful play of words, using T just once and Z, as in Ziusudra, later on. Ziusudra's life now had durability instead of a soul. 13. Goddess of Dawn. Bring me to you, Gilgamesh. Few other words can sum up the unintended consequences of the post-diluvial relationship between gods and humans as those spoken by Inanna. As the Anunnaki realized they could simply pick up all the gold they needed in the Andes, staying in the old lands was unnecessary. Ziusudra claims that Enlil changed his mind about wiping mankind off the face of the earth when he smelled the aroma of roasting meat, the Thanksgiving sacrifice of a lamb presented by Ziusudra. However, the change of heart happened as soon as the scope of the disaster became clear to the Anunnaki leadership. The gods cruised around the earth in their aircraft and shuttlecraft as the avalanche of water swept everything away below. The gods cowered like dogs, and the Anunnaki sat thirsty against the walls. In hunger, Ishtar cried out as a woman in labor. The Anunnaki wept with her. Alas, the old days have turned to clay. Ninmah was most effective. I don't know why.
Was that fast? I can't
when
remember.
She saw, the goddess wept. Her lips
Was
were
that a good
covered in
run?
fever. They looked like flies to her.
I can't remember.
The rivers are filled with them like dragonflies. A rolling sea took away their fatherhood. Enlil was shocked to discover the survival of Noah when the tidal wave retreated. Mount Ararat reappeared from the endless sea, and the Anunnaki began bringing their craft down. The long verses relate the accusations made against Enki as soon as his duplicity was revealed and his defense. There are also long verses that tell of Ninmar's vehement reprimand to Enlil for his "let's wipe them off" policy. They were created, now they're our responsibility. Enlil changed his mind after talking with her, plus the realities of the situation. Shakespearean Ninmar had played significant roles in the affairs of gods and men before the deluge, and she did so afterward too, though in a different manner. Her mother, Anu, caused her two half-brothers to fall in love, resulting in one of them having an out-of-wedlock child, Ninurta, by Enlil after she was prevented from marrying her beloved Enki. Her significance was that she was granted one of the first 5 pre-diluvial cities, Shuruppak, but ultimately created Ameluti workmen for them, earning her the titles Ninti, Mami, Nintur, and many others. She saw that her creatures had turned to clay, so she screamed at Enlil. As a result, she arbitrated between the rival half-brothers. With the respect of both sides, she negotiated the terms of peace that ended the Pyramid Wars and received the sacred Fourth Region, the Sinai Peninsula, with its spaceport as neutral territory. She is described in a long text as having been given a comfortable residence by her son Ninurta amid the mountains of the Sinai Peninsula, resulting in her Sumerian name, Ninhursag, Lady/Mistress of the Mountain Peak, and the Egyptian epithet Ntirmafqua, Goddess of Turquoise, or Mothra, meaning Mistress of the Turquoise.
Why? It was like the
Egypt
first fast run of my life.
Hathor, literally the abode of Horus, and in older age she earned the nickname the Cow both in Sumer and in Egypt for her claim to be responsible for breastfeeding the gods. However, no matter what title was used for her, it was always reserved for her. She never married the original maiden of the zodiacal constellation we call Virgo, but in addition to her son, due to their lovemaking on the banks of the Nile, several daughters by Enki were born on Earth. The tale, which has been misnomered a paradise myth, ends with Ninhursag and Enki engaged in matchmaking, pairing off young goddesses with Enkiite males. Prominent among them were spouses chosen for Ningish Zida, Enki's science-knowing son, and for Nabu, Marduk's son. Mighty matchmaking feats, to be sure, but as we shall see, not the last of Ninhursag's power links and string pullings through births and marriages, in which she was joined by her younger sister, the goddess Bau, and by Bau's daughter Ninsun. One of the Anunnaki great gods was Bau, who came from Nibiru. Her spouse was Ninurta, making her a daughter-in-law of Ninhursag. Still, Bau herself was Anu's youngest daughter. Nonetheless, these connections served as a bond between the two goddesses, especially since Bau also gained a reputation as a medical doctor, credited in several tales with bringing back the dead. Ninurta was given a sacred precinct built by King Gudea, king of Lagash, in which she and Ninurta settled. The idea of caring for the people and not for gods is a unique aspect of the love for humankind that Bau picked up from
it actually
Ninhursag.
passed him away.
Affectionately known by her
Like how many
nickname
back
Gula,
boosts?
the big one,
1,000,000?
she was invoked in prayers as Gula, the great physician, and in incursions was asked to put illness and unhealing sores on an adversary. Whatever the case, her nickname accurately reflected her size. Unlike Ninmar, who was always a bridesmaid but never a bride, Ninsun was always a bride, in a way, since Gilgamesh, among others, was said to be one of her sons. After his father's death, she outlived one mortal spouse after another until the end of the 3rd dynasty of Ur. In her family album, should she have one, she would have 11 children with the deified demigod Lugalbanda and her own. Sumer's goddesses, Ninhursag, Bao, and Ninsun, had a hand in guiding its royals both in life and death, including the most challenging female mystery. We shall soon see that Inanna/Ishtar, the 4th prominent female activist, had her own agenda. Following the deluge, the Anunnaki were committed to making the Earth habitable again after sharing it with mankind. Everything they did was driven by their vision of becoming interplanetary benefactors. Ninurta created habitable areas by damming mountain passes and draining the water overflow in the Euphrates-Tigris plain because Enki Ptah created dams with sluices in the Nile Valley to drain floodwaters. Enki and Enlil likely oversaw feats of genetic domestication of plants and animals in a chamber of creation, which was probably situated on the great stone platform that the Gyges used as a landing place. No matter how you view it, Anu did create Earthlings as laborers in mines and fields, so when he visited the planet around 4000 BC, he established several new cities, exactly where the pre-diluvial ones had been, and rebuilt pre-diluvial towns. A god Nidaba was in charge of writing, overseeing both regular and specialized tools, or Nin. Kashi, who was in the order of beer brewing, another of Sumer's firsts, and a significant part of the people's social lives, or Nin-A, who superintended the land's water resources. Based on archaeological finds, many have written of how cities became cult centers for this or that particular deity, where priests provided the resident creators with the leisurely life of privileged overlords. Nisaba is also known as Ninmulmula, Lady of the Solar System, an astronomer whose job included providing celestial orientation for new temples in Sumer and Egypt, where she was worshipped as Sesheta. Nanshe, another female deity, is the goddess who determines New Year's Day. With the addition of the traditional medical services provided by the group of Suds, one who gives succor, who arrived with Ninma, the services overseen by the goddesses encompassed every aspect of civilized life. The expansion of the role of goddesses in the affairs and hierarchy of the Anunnaki is expressed graphically in a sacred Hittite site called Yazilikhaya in central Turkey, where two equal groups of male gods and female goddesses are carved on rock faces as they make their way toward each other. The actual power and authority that the second and third generations of Anunnaki wielded on Earth led to an increasing feminization in relations between Anunnaki and Earthlings. The nurse Sud was renamed
Mula, I know you wish, right?
Spouse. Her title as Lady of the Command did not make her a commanding leader. The spouse of Enki, Damkina, was renamed Ninki, Lady of the Earth, when he became Enki, but she never became Mistress of the Earth. While Ningal had official status with Enlil's Earthborn son, Nanar Sin, she had no known authority or powers. Ereshkigal and Inanna, daughters of Nanar Sin and Ningal, differed from goddesses born on Earth. As soon as Inanna was made divine head of Arata, she demanded that it be given full status as the third regent. Marduk was capable of choosing kings and ordering them. When Marduk killed her bridegroom Dumuzi, she launched and led an intercontinental war.
Stupid fucking war.
Ereshkigal was crucial to scientific observations regarding the deluge and, in later times, the determination of the zodiacal ages. In exchange for her disdain for marrying Enki's balding and limping son Nergal, Ereshkigal was promised to become mistress of the lower world, the southern tip of Africa. Text after text describes Ereshkigal's ruthless decision to wield the resulting power. The issue of demigods
Doak
was one
an
of the
asshole.
key areas where all these changes manifested themselves.
Yeah, that's the strat.
The Sumerian civilization, which began some 6,000 years ago, laid the foundations for all of what we call civilization today. As a rule, it resulted in growth, technological advancements, and prosperity. As a king, Lugal, Big Man, took on the role of administrator, promulgator of laws, dispenser of justice, builder of roads and canals, and maintainer of relations with other centers. The best Lugal could only be akin to the demigods who existed before the deluge, and afterwards too, because they were endowed, in fact or by assumption, with greater intelligence, physical strength, and longevity than the average earthling. Demigods were the best choice to serve as the bridge between gods and mortals, mainly when the king also served as the high priest authorized to approach the god. However, where would these demigods come from in post-diluvial times? From various texts, we can deduce that they were made to order with a few exceptions, but the Sumerian king list does not directly mention the demigod status of the kings who made up the first dynasty of Kish, the one that began post-diluvial kingship under Ninurta. In the same way as king list, we have focused on Etana and his legendary spaceships, concluding that his reign length, 1,560 years, and eligibility for space visits to Nibiru contribute to his demigod status, which is confirmed by the fact that Etana was of the same pure seed as Adapa. The names of some later Kish kings, such as Enmenuna, 660 years, and Enmebaragesi, 900 years, suggest the presence of demigods in between the non-divine successors. After the Enlil group and Ninurta listings in Tablet 1 of the Great God List, 14 names start with D: Lugal, divine; Lugal-Gishta, divine; Lugal-Zaru, etc. In Kish, these individuals were either not known as kings or had other epithet names. It is unknown otherwise, but they are demigods who possess their Dingir determinative. There is a significant change in demigodness where data is provided. Demigodness resulted from the pure seed of a male parent in the pre-diluvial era and for some time afterward. The accession of Mesalim, also written Mesilim, a name whose significance we will examine soon, to the throne of Kish, was a significant change. This telltale inscription can be seen on the silver case discovered among the artifacts. Mesalim, king of Kish, beloved son of Ninkasa. Because the king proved correct by his other inscriptions, would not have dared present the case to the goddess if it were not true. A birth involving Ninhasag as the mother must be taken into account despite her advanced age. This could even include artificial insemination, as was claimed in another instance in which Ninhasag was involved. By writing an inscription regarding a king named Eannatum in the city of Lagash, whose patron god was Ninurta, here renamed Ningursa after the sacred precinct of the town, the Anunnaki are known to have established the demigod qualifications of a future king. During his reign around 2450 BC, Eannatum gained fame as a fierce warrior whose feats were recorded in texts and on monuments, establishing his legendary status. He claimed divine ancestry on a stela, currently on display at the Louvre, through artificial insemination and birth involving several deities. The inscription reads, Ningirsu, the warrior of Enlil, implanted Eannatum with Enlil's semen. We celebrated Eannatum. As he sat on the holy lap of Ninhasag, Inanna named him worthy of the temple of Inanna in Ibgal. She gave him the breasts of her love. Eannatum rejoiced at Ningirsu's news. Ningirsu implanted semen in the womb. According to the inscription, Eannatum is the size of a giantite, as if in response to a future question. The extent of Ningirsu's attack was as follows. He set his forearm on him for 5 forearms. He measured the length of 5 forearms for him. Ningirsu was delighted. King Lagash gave him the throne. Earnatum's span of 5 forearms means he was over 8 feet tall, or about 100 inches tall. The term forearm corresponds to the distance from the elbow to the end of the middle finger, which is on average about 20 inches. We understand that semen of Enlil in the opening statement refers to Ninurta's own semen, which carried the seed of Enlil. As in Sumerian tales of the gods, the Egyptian god Thoth, Ningishzida in Sumer, extracted the semen of the dead and dismembered Osiris and impregnated Isis with it, who later gave birth to the god Horus. A depiction depicts Thoth combining 2 separate strands of DNA to attain the feat. A similar instance is described in Sumer of the foremost son of Enlil's involvement, and we have an example of that in the case of Earnatum. There are reasons to believe that all 9 kings of the first dynasty of Lagash were demigods somehow. They belong to the first dynasty of Lagash established by Ninurta in reaction to kingship being transferred from Kish, under his aegis, to Uruk, under Inanna's patronage. Despite being referred to in inscriptions as the son of Earnatum, Entemena succeeded Earnatum on the Lagash throne. Ninurta is the patron god of the revered Kish dynasty. As a result of how he was born, Earnatum claimed he assumed the title of King of Kish, linking him genetically. There is no need to guess how other kings of Kish qualified as demigods, as the capital of Sumer moved from Kish to Uruk when Miski-Agashe's father, Utu, was named the first king. In keeping with that fact, it should be remembered that Utu, later known as Shamash, or the sun god, represented the second generation of great Anunnaki born on Earth, and that his fathering of the head of a new dynasty represents a significant change from the olden gods who came from Nibiru to an Earth-born and bred deity. Lugalbanda, the third king of Uruk, followed this generational change, which also had genetic implications. The mother, in this case, was identified as the goddess Inanna, the twin sister of Utu. She, too, was a second-generation Earth baby of the Anunnaki. Her mother Ninurta and her spouse Bau were also Earth babies. A second divine maternal involvement took place in Uruk with the naming of the goddess Ninsun as the wife of Lugalbanda, and her recognition as the mother of Gilgamesh. With her name clearly engraved on a stone portrait found in Lagash, Ninsun appears elegant and serene. She was a master of court intrigues, as she was the mother of 11 children, Lugalbanda. An example of her matchmaking can be found in the Gilgamesh epic, where she discussed with Aya, the wife of Utu, her choice of a young goddess as a wife for Enkidu to reward him for risking his life to protect Gilgamesh. Ninsun lived long enough to mother several subsequent kings, retaining some of her parents' longevity and heroic stature genes. The drama of her life and death during the first dynasty of Ur will highlight our story. After Gilgamesh's death, Sumer's capital remained in Ur for a little over a century before shifting to several other cities. In approximately 2400 BC, Lugal-Zagesi, a vital king, made Ur his capital for the third time. The goddess Nisaba was claimed to be his mother in several inscriptions. Due toaduhhbro Nisaba.
They literally use Native Americans to save the government 0.25% on its annual budget by not paying its employees. Just because.
Enlil, and she is sometimes referred to as Ninurta's sister. However, in the Great God list, she was
tomorrow I
described
will
as
have
divine
the same
Nisaba,
benefits
a female from divine Ninlil's
as if,
pure sacred
if
womb.
I had stayed at that job.
This meant that she was the earthborn daughter of Ninlil and Enlil, a full sister of Nana-Sin and a half-sister of Ninurta, whose mother was Ninmah.
Oh, you didn't see that before?
From
Yeah,
the 9 kings of Kish, Lagash and Uruk, whose demigod parentage has been established, here is what emerges in probable chronological order. Atana, son of Adapa, Enki's Meskiagashe. Utu is the father Enmerkar, Utu is the father of Etana. Eonatum, Ninurta's seed, placed on Ninhursag's lap for breastfeeding. Misalim, beloved of Ninhursag. Lugalbanda, mother of Ninhursag. Gilgamesh, sister of Ninsun. Lugalzagezi, mother of Nizaba. 2-3 punches reveal the significant double shift in the affairs of gods and demigods post-diluvial time. First, the earthborn generations replace the founding fathers, progenitors who came from Nibiru. Then, with the help of the sacred breast milk, the last change is introduced. The feminine womb replaces the earlier male womb and the pure semen. The implications of these changes are long-term, so it is essential to understand.
Telling you, man, they want to start like
as the role of parenting demigods
war.
was taken over by
People are gonna start
earthborn
hating the
gods and
natives
goddesses,
because they're gonna get
was it
unpaid
simply a matter of
holidays.
nature taking its course, or was it because Earth, not Nibiru, was their home planet that genealogical succession through demigods became more vital? According to some theories, the changes from Nibiru to Earth affected both the longevity of the gods and demigods and their physical appearance,
Like,
making
people are
them
gonna
less
lose
giant-like over time.
Over $100
In their
tomorrow
records,
each.
the Anunnaki acknowledged that those who stayed on Earth,
It's just so
Enki,
ridiculous, man.
Enlil, Ninmah, aged more rapidly than those who remained on Nibiru, and that those born on Earth aged even faster. Now, genetic advancements
it's
allow us to know
unionized.
that the
What
switch
does the
in
union
parenthood
do?
from the male fecund seed to the female goddess's divine womb
It's fine, I don't work
resulted
there.
in the demigods adopting the general DNA of the goddesses, but also her mitochondrial DNA as well. Throughout the saga of gods and demigods, the significance of these changes will become clear. As we see it in the Bible, the significant change between pre-Diluvian and post-Diluvian demigod times can be summed up as follows. Before, the sons of the gods chose whomever they wanted from among the daughters of mankind. Now, the daughters of the gods choose whomever they wanted from the sins of mankind. Through Sita's 6 words, Sita encapsulated the goddess's role in all of that. In cases when the mother was the deity, referring to her as the husband of the male no longer held true, the companion of the goddess was the male father. Gilgamesh was brought into the goddess era when Inanna said, "Come, be my lover." After the death of Gilgamesh, Uruk's heroic age ended with Enmerkar, Lugalbanda, and Gilgamesh. Utu, his son, took Uruk's place.
Yeah, dude, I used to pick
The
up
combined reign of
I used to pick
Kalama
up
and the 5 kings
a lot of
following him
orders in
was
the mall.
95 years.
people would order from the
According
mall
to
a lot
King
for
List,
Uber Eats.
only Meshe was accorded
It's
an
like
extra work
bubble
because he was
tea,
a smith. All in all,
a lot of
King List
comfort
notes
food.
that 12 kings ruled
A
in
lot of
Uruk for
comfort food.
2,310 years. Its kingship passed to Ur.
Especially during the day.
It is recalled for their progress and stability,
Like
but
people at
not
work.
necessarily for their peaceful
Freaking
eras that the dynasties of what is now called Kish and
Reconsidering
Uruk
everything in their
ruled.
life, they order their
The
most
expansion of
comforting,
cities
most
into
comforting food.
city-states led to armed conflicts over boundaries,
Japanese
arable
bubble
land,
tea,
and water resources on the
little
national
pastries,
level.
little Chinese pastries.
The end of Dumuzi affected Inanna the most emotionally, so much so that it even led to her death. Due to Dumuzi's death and Inanna's fierce war against Marduk, the hopes placed on the Inanna-Dumuzi union were dashed internationally.
I think I learned the most about
The
people
story is told in the text
during my
called
Uber Eats
Inanna's
job. I learned a
Descent
lot
to the
about
Netherworld,
people. Holy shit.
misleadingly titled Inanna's
And
Descent
the
to the Lower
state
World
of
by
society.
scholars. Inanna went to Ereshkigal's lower world domain
That's really
after
good old
Dumuzi's death. Ereshkigal had
Dude, I
suspicions
think
about
I made,
Inanna,
what,
who
95
came
deliveries?
uninvited and met Nergal, her sister's
Only
husband.
like 5
Thus,
to
Ereshkigal
10
ordered Inanna to be
wanted to
seized,
meet
killed
me in
with death
person.
rays, and hung as
The
a
rest,
carcass
like the
as
other
punishment.
85,
Enki
wanted
was
me
the
to
only
leave
one
it
who could
at
help
the
when
door
Inanna's handmaiden, who
and
remained in
drive
Uruk,
away.
raised the alarm. Having constructed 2 clay androids
Isn't that
that
so
could withstand the
wild?
death rays, he activated one by giving it
I
the food of life, and the other
I
by
always
giving
pick
it the
up
water of life.
the food hand
They
delivery
sprinkled the
from the
water of
delivery guy
life
when I
and the
order.
plant of life on Inanna's
Isn't
corpse,
that so
and she
weird?
arose when they
The
found her lifeless
the
body.
vast majority.
According to scholars, Inanna went to the lower world to search for Dumuzi's body.
They say don't knock the door.
However, she
don't knock on
already
door
knew
versus
where the
kids
body
usually.
was, since
It says
she had ordered
no
its
knocking, I think it's
mummification and
kids.
preservation. In Divine Encounters,
Or just
I
some
suggested that
psychopaths,
she sought fulfillment
but
from
nobody
Nergal of
wants
a custom
to
related
open
to
the
the
door
Bible,
for
in which a
anybody.
brother, as Nergal was from Dumuzi, sleeps with the widow to have a son who will carry on the dead man's name. But Ereshkigal would not allow it. A notable change that resulted from this unhappy marriage with Dumuzi was the
Amazon
introduction by Inanna of the sacred marriage ritual. On the anniversary of the unhappy marriage with Dumuzi, she spent the night with a man of her choice, usually the king. Often, this man was found dead the following day. The transfer of significant
Imagine
capital
ordering a
to
hot
Ur
meal
may have been an attempt to gain
and rather
respite
have
by
it
shifting
sitting on your
responsibility to
porch.
Nana Sin, Inurta's younger brother, and Inanna's father. It was a cult
Instead of
center for
receiving it
Enlil's son, Nana,
directly from the
meaning
driver.
Bright One, a reference to the moon, established post-diluvial. Sumer was
like,
destined to play a significant
think
role
this
in
is
the
my-
affairs of men
I don't
and
think
gods.
this is my like
Its
society,
story crossed
man.
paths with Abraham's in the Bible,
I
but
don't
that
think
would
these
not
are my
occur
people.
until Ur would serve as Sumer's capital for the third time. During what is known as the Ur-1 period, following Uruk I, Ur, according to King List, had 4 kings who reigned for 177 years. Mesanipada and Meskiagnana is the most distinguished of them. While Ur's most glorious and tragic period came later, in the Ur-3 period,
I don't know what that
the
word means.
archaeological evidence shows that Ur's
I'm
first
nodding my head
nearly
like I
2
do, but I have no
centuries
idea what that
were a
word means.
period of high culture and
mind
significant
explaining if that's okay,
artistic
Ben?
and technological progress. In
Agoraphobia.
Sumer, no one knows whether the reign was cut short by
Social
mounting
interaction,
pressures
yeah.
at the borders or by internal problems. King List itself suggests some turbulent events had taken place, causing the record keepers to list 5 names, not 4, amend one of them, and confuse reign lengths.
There's a lot of shame
However
with Uber
troubling
Eats,
the
though,
events
'cause
were,
it's so
the
expensive.
record shows that the national
People
capital
are
was
ashamed,
abruptly
or at
moved
least
from
I was
Ur to a
ashamed
small town
when I
called
ordered it.
Awan, then to
When I
Hamasi,
didn't, when my car was
Ada,
broken
then
down.
Kish, Uruk, and
It's just
Ur,
so fucking
shifted
expensive.
to Mari and Akshay, and then back again to Kish in approximately 2 centuries. A strong man named Lugal Zagezi was then appointed as Uruk's king by the gods for the 3rd time. Inanna's aunt Nisaba was his mother, so presumably this should have been sufficient to ensure his blessing. He used his own troops to remove troublesome rulers as
Oh,
part
wow,
of his
really?
effort to restore order among the quarreling and warring city-states. Lugal Zagesi punished Umar for serving as a cult center for Inanna's son, Shara. Therefore, Lugal Zagesi was gone soon after that, and the next king of kings was a man of Inanna's own choosing, a man who answered her call, "Come, be my lover." Having been in charge for millennia, a goddess now held. No matter what you call him, he's a hero.
This is the run.
2 of Ur's names are significant because they share a prefix of mes with Uruk's. Mesbe, he equals fullness, plenty,
No.
as well as that of Kish, Mes Alim. Alim equals ram, claimed to have been in Harsag's beloved son.
This is so fucking dumb, man.
Did the prefix mes
It's way
or
too
the suffix
expensive.
mesh, as in Gilgamesh, designate the person as a demigod? In fact, the Sumerian term mes meant hero, in the same way the Hebrew term Gibor defined the demigods in Genesis 6. This conclusion is supported by BM 56488, an Akkadian text concerning a specific temple that contains the following statement. Misanipada ipushu gibitsha. Misanipada built a temple. Nana akit ziri u talpit. It was Nana, the seed giver, who destroyed the world. By referring to Nana Sin as the seed giver, Mesanipada is simultaneously assigned the determinative divine and
everyone has
indicating
cameras
what God
now
created this demigod.
on the front of their house.
We must also wonder,
the doorbell,
in light of other similarities between the Sumerian Mes and the Egyptian Mes,
have you seen that shit?
as in Thothmes or Ramses, meaning issue of,
so
in
every house has like this fucking
whether the
CCTV system
and Egyptian
sent directly to Beijing.
do not derive from the same early source. We believe the conclusion that Sumerian royal names beginning or ending with Mes indicate demigod status will
and even
serve
not
as
like
a clue
mansions,
to unlocking
like every
various
house.
enigmas. 14. Empires of glory,
So
winds
crazy,
of doom.
so cold.
Someday, my queen,
Received by
Inanna
this
crosses
fucking
heaven,
camera.
crosses earth. Having crossed heaven and earth, having crossed Elam and Shubhur, upon crossing, weary, he fell asleep as he approached. She was standing in my garden. She kissed me, and we mated. A gardener, later known as Shahrukhin, Sargon in English, described his chance encounter with Inanna in this way. Due to the exhaustion of the goddess from flying about, one cannot say that love was at first sight, but from what followed, it is evident that Inanna liked the man and his lovemaking.
Man, food delivery saved my life after my head injury.
Sargon wrote in his autobiography that Ishtar
would
granted
order
him
a
her
lot of
love
food-
while he was a
food
gardener,
delivery.
and for
I was,
450
barely
years
surviving,
he
though.
ruled and governed the black-headed people.
And I was in
Anunnaki
Toronto, so they had
leadership is
insane
never
food
clear
there, like
how
Thai,
Inanna
and
persuaded them to
I heard
trust
a lot of
Sumer
Thai.
and its people. The black-headed ones, known by their nickname Sarge-Ga, to the man whose kiss changed history.
Yeah, it saved
His
my life.
name was Shahrukhin, truthful ruler. In the Semitic tongue of the Amuro, the westerners of the Semitic-speaking area northwest of Sumer, his features are preserved in a bronze sculpture, figure 101, confirming his non-Sumerian background. Known by the Semitic name Akkad, he built a new capital city for himself in Agade, from which the language's
I'm
name
telling you, man,
derives.
this unpaid day
As a
off
result
is
of the importance of this king,
it's some
the
sort of
Sumerian
psychological
English indicates
humiliation
that
ritual.
kingship to Agade was carried by Lugal-Zagesi, and mentions that Shahrukhin, a date grower and cupbearer of Ur-Zababa, built Agade and reigned there for 56 years. In ancient Mesopotamia,
On top of them saving
Egypt, and elsewhere,
0.25% of
cupbearers
the
held
budget.
high ranks and great trust. It will be remembered even on Nibiru, where Anu served as Alalu's cupbearer. Scholars believe that some of the earliest Sumerian depictions referred to as libation scenes depict naked kings serving the gods as cupbearers. Apparently, Sargon was a royal prince in Kish under Ur-Zababa, the king of Kish. Sargon himself chose to keep his origin a mystery in the Legend of Sargon, the autobiographical text in which he wrote his autobiography. Agade's mighty king, Sargon, I am. I did not know who my father was. My mother was a high priestess. As a high priestess, my mother conceived me in secret. As in the story of Moses' birth 1,000 years later in Egypt, Sargon continued, the basket of rushes was sealed with bitumen, and she placed me in it. I did not sink when she threw me into the river. Aki, the gardener, bore me, carried me to the river. As Aki, the irrigator, drew water, he lifted me up. He made me and reared me as his son. Aki, the irrigator, as his gardener, Aki, the irrigator, appointed me. In time, the position of high priestess for the god Nana Sin in Ur, seen as one of great honor to Sargon's own daughter, Enheduanna, might explain Sargon's odd avoidance of claiming princehood. By claiming the same status as his mother, Sargon implied that his unknown father might be a god, thus making him a demigod. Considering the pressures on Sumer by migrants from the west and northwest, Sargon's Amorite heritage might have been regarded as a factor. Accordingly, establishing a new neutral national capital named Union also meant incorporating territories called Akkad north of olden Sumer, so that a new entity was called Sumer and Akkad. Henceforth, Inanna became known as the Akkadian name Ishtar. A few centuries later, Sargon set out from that capital to establish law and order, starting with the defeat of Lugal-Zagesi, who, the reader will recall, assaulted the city of Ishtar's son, the god Shara. The king turned his prowess against neighboring lands as he conquered old cities after old towns. In the era of Ishtar, Sharukin, king of Agade, became the ultimate ruler. He ruled over all the countries in his territory and crossed the sea in the east. He conquered the west in its entirety. From the upper sea, the Mediterranean, to the lower sea, the Sea of the East, the entire first region was firmly ruled by a national capital for the first time since its formation millennia previously.
Yeah, I saw.
Sargon's empire was the first historically known empire to extend to the Mediterranean coast in the west, as well as the Persian Gulf. While Sargon acknowledged, when necessary, the authority of Enlil, Ninurta, Adad, and Nanna, he did so through the Kabul River in Asia Minor in the north. The conquests of Utu were carefully accomplished by order of my mistress, the divine Ishtar.
Look at that, insane.
It was in fact the era of Ishtar, as the inscriptions claim. It was a grand sight to see Agade as the imperial capital. In those days, as Sumerian texts stated, Agade was rich in precious metals, copper, lead, and lapis lazuli slabs. Its granaries bulged at the sides. Its old men were endowed with wisdom, its old women with eloquence, its young men with weapons, and its children with joyful hearts. An impressive new temple in Agade clarified which goddess ruled all of this.
That's not
in
nice.
Agade, Holy Inanna erected a temple as her abode. In the glittering temple, her throne. Her shrines had to be built throughout Sumerian cities, outshining even the sacred Eanna in Uruk. That was a mistake. Growing arrogant and overbearing, Sargon made grave errors, including sending troops into cities beholden to Ninurta and Adad. His next act was to desecrate Babylon. Near olden Sumer, in the territory designated Akkad, lay Babylon, the very spot where Marduk attempted to build his own launch tower, the Tower of Babel incident. He made another Babylon near Agade after removing soil from the foundations of Babylon. To understand this unauthorized activity, it is essential to remember that Babylon, as Babylon was known in Akkadian, meant gateway of the gods, a sacred place, and that Marduk, upon learning that the site must remain undisturbed, was persuaded to give up. Moreover, Sargon took soil from Babylon's foundations to build another gateway of the gods, adjoining the one at Agade. Marduk was enraged by the sacrilege, and the clash of clans was reignited. In addition to breaking the taboo regarding Babylon, Sargon also planned to create his own gateway of the gods at Agade, and this angered Enlil.
Come on, man.
As a result, Sargon's rapid removal and death did not end the era of Ishtar. Her son Rimush became king of Agade with the consent of Enlil, but he was replaced after 9 years by his brother Manishtushu, who ruled for 15 years. Inanna, Ishtar, had asked once again the son of Manishtushu, Naram Sin. Whom Sin loves was Naram Sin's theophoric name. He used the Akkadian name Sin rather than the Sumerian word Nanna. The king was able to build on the foundations laid by his grandfather with military expeditions and commerce, establishing trading posts for Sumerian merchants in distant places and creating trade routes on a global scale, which reached as far north as the Hittite domain of Nanna's brother, Ishkur. Naram Sin's two-track policy could not quell the rise of cities, particularly in the west, supporting Marduk's renewed ambitions. With his wife Sarpanit and his earthborn son Nabu also marrying earthlings named Tashmetum, Marduk gained support among the masses. The expectations for Marduk's ultimate victory reached messianic fervor in Egypt, where Marduk/Ra has been worshipped as the hidden Amen, Amon, and Egyptian pharaohs began to push northward, seizing control of the Mediterranean. Inanna, Ishtar, thus guided and blessed Naram-Sin to launch against the sinning cities in the west, which was the most significant military expedition in history.
This is so fast.
Having captured what was later called Canaan, he continued south to Magan, ancient Egypt. His merciless approach and capture of rivals are commemorated by a stone plaque depicting a glowing Ishtar offering him a wreath of victory. Among his inscriptions is a statement that he personally captured the king of Magan. Naram-Sin haughtily defined himself on a victory stiller astride a rocket ship in the heavens after crossing the forbidden fourth region with its spaceport. He hailed himself as a god. As a hero accustomed to high-handedness, he placed a restraining hand on the Ekur, Enlil's sacred precinct, Nippur. Enlil was not present, so he demanded Enlil endorse him as king of the four regions. Enlil describes his reaction to these unprecedented acts of disobedience and sacrilege in a text known as the Curse of Agadi. He called all the gods, including Enki, to summon the Anunnaki leadership to an assembly, but Inanna didn't show up. As she remained defiant inside the venerated temple of Eanna in Uruk, she demanded that the gods declare her as the supreme female deity. A woman has seized the heavenly kingship, the ancient text noted in amazement. Inanna has altered the rules of Holy Anu. The gods decided in their assembly to wipe out Agade and all that goes along with it. Gutium, a land across the Zagros Mountains, was occupied by Ninurta's troops, who systematically destroyed Agade. No one is even sure where Agade was. Indeed, the gods decreed that its remains will never be found. In the wake of the city's demise, Naram-Sin too disappeared from the records.
Oh, I hear what you're saying.
Brought Lenana, Ishtar, back
like the Aztecs.
She told Nana that she
all
had
the sacrificing
enough, so she would live in Ur with her
and
mother's
death
family.
and murder.
The era of Ishtar ended in
And
2255 BC. Her
sad.
empire and the challenges to ancient
Very
authority left their mark on the ancient Near East for generations to come. The kingship of Sumer and Akkad did not exist for about a century. According to the Sumerian king list, who was king, who was not king, was a way of describing the situation. Ninurta governed the country de facto from his cult center in Lagash, a city whose historical records, artifacts, and sculptures have provided essential information about Sumer, the Sumerians, and the Sumerian civilization. The archaeological evidence from the Tello site reveals that dynastic rule began in Lagash with a ruler named Lugar. Shu-Engur dynastic rule was established in Lagash in about 3000 BC by King Lugar-Shu-Engur. This dynasty was responsible for the artificial insemination of Eannatum. More than a half-millennium of uninterrupted dynastic rule in Lagash indicates a country's stability during turbulent times. The list of Lagash's kings includes 43 names. Lagash is an ancient language. Lagash's kings preferred to be called Patesi, governors, instead of Lugar. Lugar left behind countless votive inscriptions and other pieces of evidence. The textual evidence indicates that they were enlightened kings who sought to shape their people's lives according to their gods' high moral and ethical standards. The most incredible honor a king could attain was given the epithet Righteous Shepherd by Ninurta. The Code of Laws of Urukinga, a king who reigned about 4,500 years ago, prohibited abuse of authority, raking away of a widow's donkey, and delaying wages of the daily workers. A king's personal duty was to construct canals for irrigation and transportation, and construct communal buildings. Some of the best
So fucking
Sumerian
dumb.
sculptures were created 2,000 years before classical Greece.
This is so fucking dumb,
Festivals
man.
involving everyone, such as the Festival of First Fruits, were introduced. Literacy was encouraged, as evidenced by some of the most perfect cuneiform scripts. Lagash was not a national capital, nor is it mentioned in the Sumerian king list. With the transfer of the seat of federal rule from Kish to Uruk in religious political terms, Ninurta established what were then the best trained troops in the land to protect his own redoubt outside the reach of Inanna's whims and ambitions. After the Inanna-Naram Sin upheavals, Ninurta restored Enlilite authority and brought Sumer a century of respite. However, Asgard continued to put relentless pressure on Sumer and Akkad, which led to the fall of Sumer and Akkad into ruins. Around 2160 BC, Enlil commissioned Ninurta to build a unique temple in Lagash that proclaims Ninurta's supremacy. Ninurta, the next Enlil, had the rank of 50 just below Anu, and his temple would be called E Ninu, House, Temple of 50. A king named Gudea, the Anointed One, built a temple in the Gyes, the sacred precinct of Lagash, as detailed in the extensive inscriptions found in the excavated remains of Lagash. It all started with a dream that Gudea had, recorded on clay cylinders on display at the Louvre Museum in Paris. A man wearing the headdress of a god appeared to Gudea, bright and shining like heaven, and he ordered him to build him a temple. She pointed at a particular star while holding a tablet with a celestial map. Her head was shaped like a temple. Then another deity appeared with a tablet in one hand and building brick. The building brick was lying in a basket by his side, and the tablet with the design was lying on Gudea's lap. Completely confused by the experience, commemorated in one of Gudea's statues, Gudea went to the goddess Nina's cult center Sirara, the house of face-solving, and asked her to solve the dream and determine what the objects were. Nina said that the first god was Nin, first lord of the Gyes, alias Ninurta. He commands you to build a new temple. The goddess is Nisaba. Build the temple according to what the holy planet instructs you. The other god is Ningishzida. The brick he gave you will serve as a mold. The carrying basket means that you have been assigned the task of construction. The tablet with the design is the architectural design of the 7-stage temple. Its name, she said, shall be Eninu. It was a rare honor for Gudea to help build a brand new temple from foundations up, when most other kings just repaired existing ones. Having mobilized the entire population for the project, he made it. He learned that the architectural requirements were far from straightforward. There was to be a domed observatory at the top for determining star and planet positions after nightfall, and there were also 2 stone circles in the forecourt for determining constellations on equinox day. Additionally, 2 sunken enclosures were required, one for Ninurta's aircraft, the divine blackbird, and the other for his awesome weapon. Gudea writes in his clearly written inscriptions in perfect Sumerian script that he had to go to the gods repeatedly and that he could not sleep until the task was completed. At one point, he was ready to give up, but in a command vision, he was instructed to begin building the engine. A cylinder known as Gudea Cylinder A records the preliminary events and details of the complex construction. Cycle B is devoted to elaborate rites tied to the temple, inauguration, specifically on New Year's Day, and the ceremonies surrounding Ningirsu and Bao's arrival at the Gyes and their entry into their new temple. The book closes with a recorded blessing of Gudea by Bao in appreciation of his construction efforts. As his reward, without explaining how it was granted, was Namti Muna Sud, his lifetime sustained / prolonged. Cylinder A introduces himself. In Cylinder A, Gudea repeatedly called Nina his mother, a daughter of Enlil and Ninlil, and a half-sister of Ninurta. Additionally, Bau twice referred to him as son of Nina in the blessing at the end of Cylinder B. These texts also provide some insight into his birth. In a sacred place he spoke to Nina. "Thou didst bring me forth from the seed implanted in thy womb by the goddess Bau," he said. He was a child brought forth by Bau. Gudea claimed to be a demigod born of the Enlil-Ninurta clan through Bau and Nina. Inunu's challenge to Marduk was compounded by the role of Egypt's Ningishzida and Nisaba, Thoth as the deity and Sesheta as the goddess. It was especially significant that Ningishzida, Thoth, actively participated in the project since he was the son of Enki Ptah and the half-brother of Marduk, Ra. Interestingly, his other half-brother, Nergal, who was married to Enlil's granddaughter in Ereshkigal, also often sided with the Enlilites. Marduk and Nabu gained adherents and conquered territory despite all that. Ninurta, the presumed heir of Enlil and Anu, had ties to Nibiru, but Marduk and Nabu belonged to Earth. This posed a growing problem for the Enlilites. After announcing the Ninurta strategy, the Enlilites switched to the Sin tactic, transferring the seat of national power from Ninurta to Nanna, whose Akkadian name was Sin, unlike Ninurta. The city of Ur, situated between Eridu to the south and Uruk to the north along the Euphrates River, was by then Sumer's prosperous commercial and manufacturing hub. Its very name, meaning urban domesticated place, came to mean not just city, but the city, and meant prosperity and health. Sumerian people loved the gods Nanna Sin and Ningal, Nikal in Akkadian. However, they did not participate in the gods' war. People everywhere, even in the rebel lands, were meant to perceive his leadership as the beginning of an era of peace and prosperity. In Ur, a ziggurat served as the deity's abode, rising in stages inside a walled sacred precinct.
Doke, no, come on,
served as a
Trav.
residence for priests, officials, and servants. Within the walled section of the temple was the Gipar, nighttime abode, which contained the Gigunu, the chamber of nighttime pleasures for the gods.
So fucking terrible. 109.
Despite being monogamous and having only one spouse, Ningal, Nanna Sin was able and did to enjoy concubines, through whom he had children in the Gipar. Behind those walls lay a magnificent city with 2 excellent harbors and a network of canals connecting it to the Euphrates, a thriving city
really
with
bad.
a king's palace, administrative buildings, lofty gates, avenues for promenading, a marketplace, multi-level private dwellings, many 2 stories high, schools, workshops, merchants' warehouses, and animal stalls. More than 4,000 years after it was built, the ziggurat and its monumental stairways dominate the landscape. In more detail in The Wars of Gods and Men, we tell how Abraham's story intertwined with events and the fate of Sumer in Ur, the Ur of the Chaldees, in which the biblical story of Abraham the Hebrew began as the starting point of his migration to Haran and then to Canaan. Abraham was born in Nippur but grew up in Ur, where his father was a Tirbu, an Oman priest skilled in astronomy. Kingship was restarted in and from Sumer with the careful choice of a new king. In Enlil's selection and Anu's approval, the new king, Ur-Nammu, the joy of Ur, was a demigod, not a mere mortal. He was a son of Ninsun, the mother of Gilgamesh, born in Uruk, a birth approved and witnessed by Anu, Enlil, and Nanna. It is reasonable to presume that this divine genealogy, including the claim that Ninhursag raised him, was part of Ur-Nammu's reign in the presence of Nanna and other gods. As a result, Ur-Nammu held the same status as Gilgamesh, whose exploits were well remembered and whose name was revered. Thus, it was a signal to friends and foes alike that the glory days under Enlil and his clan were back.
I'm gonna play some
Inscriptions,
Villa Perfect
monuments,
Agent
and
to end
archaeological
the
findings
stream.
attest to
To be absolutely honest
Ur-Nammu's
with you,
reign's extensive public works,
I think I might do that.
restoration of river navigation, and repair of
See
the
if I can
country's
get a
highways.
sub 3-minute completion.
Schools and arts and crafts grew, and social and economic conditions
Very good goal.
improved. In addition, the priesthood of Nippur and Ur were combined for the first time in Sumerian history, resulting in a revival of religion. By our calculations, it was at that time that Terah, Abraham's father, was transferred from Nippur to Ur. Despite agreements with neighboring rulers to the east and northeast, the enmity stirred up by Marduk and Nabu to the west spread prosperity and well-being. In 2096 BC, Ur-Nammu launched a military campaign against the rebel lands and sinning cities bordering the Mediterranean Sea in response to the situation. Although he was a great builder and economic shepherd, he did not succeed as a military leader. In the middle of battle, Ur-Nammu fell off his chariot and was crushed like a jug. The tragedy was compounded when the boat returning Ur-Nammu's body to Sumer was sunk. The waves sank it down with him aboard it. Upon hearing the devastating news of Ur-Nammu's defeat and tragic death, a great lament resounded throughout Ur. People couldn't understand how such a righteous shepherd and God-fearing king could be a demigod. It was an ingenious death. Why did the Lord Nana not hold him? They asked. Why did Inanna, Lady of Heaven, not surround him with her regal arms? Why did the valiant Utu not assist him? There was only one possible explanation, the people of Ur and Sumer concluded. Enlil deceitfully changed his decree. These great gods went back on their word, and faith in them was deeply shaken. It is likely not by accident that the shocking death of Ur-Nammu in 2096 BC led the father of Abraham to relocate his family to Haran, the Caravanry, the central city that was Sumer's link to the land of the Hittites. Haran was surrounded by fertile meadows that could be used for shepherding, as it was located at the headwaters of the Euphrates River and at a crossroads of international trade and military routes. Merchants from Ur settled there and brought wool, skins and leather from the region, metals and rare stones, and their renowned woolen garments and carpets from Ur. Besides the second largest temple to Nana Sin after Ur, the city was often called the Second Ur, Sumer's most tragic era, for before the century was out, Sumer was gone. The ascension of Ur-Nammu to Ur's throne in 2113 BC marked the beginning of Ur-3. The Sumerian culture peaked during this period when monotheism, the belief in one creator god, had its roots. After Ur-Nammu died, his son Shulgi inherited the throne of Ur. His inscriptions assert that he was born under the auspices of the gods, as was his father, who claimed the status of a demigod. Through a union between Ur-Nammu and Enlil's high priestess, Nana arranged for the child to be conceived in Enlil's temple in Nippur. A little Enlil, a kingly child, shall be conceived. He acquired the habit of calling Ningal, Nana's spouse, Ningale, my mother, and my brother were Utu Shamash, their son. Then he asserted in self-laudatory terms that he was a son of Ninsun, but in another melody he claimed to be only her adopted son. He claimed to be a demigod in various and contradictory versions, which cast doubt on his claim. Immediately following his accession to the throne, Shulgi launched an expedition to the outlying provinces and the rebel territories, but his weapons were offers of trade, peace, and his daughters. By avoiding the fourth region, he reached the two destinations of the still revered Gilgamesh, the Sinai Peninsula, where the spaceport was in the south, and the landing place in the north. As he traveled, he stopped to worship at the Place of Bright Oracles, also called Jerusalem. Once he venerated the three space sites, he followed the Fertile Crescent, the east-west trade routes determined by geography and water sources, returning to Sumer. Upon returning to Ur, Shulgi was given High Priest of Anu, Priest of Nana. Utu Shamash befriended him, and then Inanna, Ishtar, gave him personal attention, whose abode had been in Ur since the demise of Naram-Sin. As a result of Shulgi's peace offensive, he turned from state affairs to become Inanna's lover after a while. He boasted that Inanna had given him her vulva in her temple in numerous love songs that have been found in the ruins of Ur. However, unrest grew again in the rebel lands as Shulgi neglected state affairs in favor of personal pleasure. As a result of his unpreparedness for war, Shulgi relied on Elamite troops to fight and build a fortified wall to protect Sumer against foreign invasions. Scholars believe it ran from where Baghdad is today, north of the Euphrates River to the Tigris River, and was therefore known as the Great West Wall. Due to that, Sumer's heartland was cut off from the northern provinces. 2,400 years ago, the gods, led by Enlil, decreed for Shulgi the death of a sinner. Significantly, it was then that Abraham left Haran for Canaan. Marduk also arrived in Haran during that same year, 2048 BC, and made it his headquarters for the next 24 years. According to a well-preserved clay tablet, his arrival represented a direct challenge to Enlilite hegemony. Along with its military significance, the move cut Sumer off from its economically vital commercial relationships. As a result, Sumer had shrunk. The chess move of Marduk's establishment of a command post at Haran enabled Nabu to marshal his cities, heading toward the Great Sea and setting his course.
Oh, you fucking idiot.
Among them were the all-important landing place in Lebanon and the mission control city of Shalem, alias Jerusalem.
Fuck off.
Then Marduk announced that the spaceport region was no longer neutral. It was to be considered a Marduk and Nabu domain. He now controlled all the space-related facilities in Egypt, his original dominion. Obviously, such a situation would not be acceptable to the Enlilites. As Shulgi's successor, Amar-Sin embarked on a military expedition after an army tour, culminating in an ambitious campaign to punish the rebel lands of the West, the biblical Canaan. The 7th year of his reign was when Amar-Sin led an alliance against the Sin cities in the West, including Sodom and Gomorrah, in an attempt to regain control of the spaceport. In my book, The Wars of Gods and Men, he was the Amraphel of Genesis 14. The Bible describes the clash as a war between the East and West. Abraham participated in the first great international war of antiquity, commanding a cavalry of camel riders called Ishnar, a literal Hebrew and Sumerian rendering of Lunar. Cavalrymen prevented the invaders from reaching the spaceport. He then pursued the retreating invaders to Damascus, nowadays Syria, to reclaim his nephew Lot, who was captured in Sodom. The gods' war was clearly evolving into a far-flung conflict involving many nations. Mar-Sin was killed by a scorpion bite rather than an enemy lance in 2039 BC. Following his death, his brother Shu-Sin took over. His reign records 2 military expeditions northward, but none westward, mainly defensive measures. He primarily built new sections of the Wall of the West. However, the defenses were continually moved closer and closer to Sumer's heartland, and the territory controlled by Ur diminished. Upon Ibbi-Sin's accession to the throne in 2029 BCE, invaders from the west had broken through Ur's defensive wall and fought Elamite troops in the Sumerian territory. The Westerners were directed and prompted by Nabu. In Haran, his divine father Marduk waited for Babylon's recapture. Marduk added a new celestial argument to his old reasons for seeking supremacy, beginning with his father Enki being stripped of his succession rights. He said that Enlil's zodiacal age of the bull, Taurus, was ending, and his era, the age of the ram, Aries, was beginning. The irony is that his own brothers pointed out that, according to astronomical observations, The zodiacal constellation of the Ram had not yet started. Ningishzida said as much. Nergal from the station in Lagash and Nergal from the observatory. There are no lower worlds. The brothers' discovery only enraged Marduk. Nabu intensified his recruiting of Marduk fighters.
Perfect agent.
Enlil's frustration and desperation grew. He convened the great guards for an emergency assembly. The assembly approved extraordinary steps that altered the future forever. Various written records from antiquity are still available, providing us not just with an overview of events, but with detailed information about battles, strategies, conversations, arguments, participants and their moves, and the critical decisions that led to the most significant worldwide upheaval since the deluge. As well as the date formulas and diverse other references, the principal sources for reconstructing these dramatic events are the relevant chapters in Genesis, Marduk's statements in the Marduk prophecy, the Kedorla Omer texts, a collection of tablets in the British Museum. The Era Epos is a long autobiographical document dictated by Nergal to a trusted scribe. It is similar to a movie, usually a crime thriller, where particular eyewitnesses and principals describe the same event differently, but from which the true story emerges. So are we able to reconstruct the actual facts in this case? Those sources tell us that Marduk did not personally attend the emergency council summoned by Enlil, but instead sent them an appeal in which he repeatedly asked, "Until when?" 24 years had passed since he had been in Haran, and he wondered, until when? When would my days of wandering end? The year 2024 BC marked the 72nd anniversary of his life on the run. 1 degree of the zodiacal circle has passed since then. Having been called to present the Enlilite case, Ninurta accused Marduk's followers of defiling Enlil's temple in Nippur, even accusing them of attacking it. Anar, Sin, primarily blamed Nabu. Nabu was summoned by the gods, and his father's son came. He pointed the finger at Ninurta. He denounced Nergal, who was present, and he showed disrespect to Enlil evil, accusing the Lord of the Command of injustice and condoning destruction. What are Marduk and Nabu actually charged with? Enki inquired. Exceedingly enraged was Nergal. "Why do you keep fighting?" he asked him. Enki shouted at Nergal to leave him alone after arguing so much with him. Then Enki consulted himself and concocted the idea of resorting to the awesome treason after being vilified by Marduk and Nabu. In a secret underground location somewhere in Africa, in his brother Gibil's domain, he did not know where they were hidden, but he knew they existed on Earth. With today's technology, they are equivalent to 7 nuclear devices. Clad with terror, with a brilliance they advance. They were accidentally brought to Earth by Alalu fleeing Nibiru, and were hidden in a secret place long ago. Enki knew where, as did Enlil. The gods, overruling Enki, met as a war council to decide to punish Marduk. The gods made it absolutely clear to Nergal and Ninurta that the mission was limited and conditional. The ancient records state that Anu, lord of the gods, on earth had pity. Anu to earth, the words he spoke. Earth to Anu, the words he spoke. He made it clear that his approval for the unprecedented step of using
there's like an
weapons
Oasis song somewhere in that last message you wrote.
The Sinai spaceport, but that neither gods nor people should be harmed. Anu, lord of the gods, on earth had pity. The epic Ishum begins in 2024 BC. The two kings Ninurta, called the Scorcher in Ishum, and Nergal, called the Annihilator in Era, unleashed nuclear weapons which destroyed the spaceport and adjacent sinning cities near the Dead Sea. As described by the Bible, Abraham, who was then encamped in the mountains overlooking the Dead Sea, was notified of what was to come by 3 Malachim translated as angels, but literally meaning emissaries, earlier that day. Abraham's nephew Lot lived in Sodom, and Abraham's 2 other nephews followed him. The Era Epos tells us that Ishum, Ninurta, set out in his divine blackbird to mount the most supreme night. Arriving there, the mount was smashed when he raised his hand. By the mount most supreme plain, then he annihilated. Not a single tree stem remained in its forests. By 2 pinpointed nuclear drops, Ninurta obliterated the spaceport first, Mount Most Supreme, also known as Mount Moshu in the Gilgamesh epic, and then the adjoining plain that served as a landing and takeoff area. An image taken from space shows the scarring in the Sinai Peninsula, where the plain amid white limestone mountains is still covered with crushed and deeply burned rocks. The destruction of the sinning cities was a complicated process. Nergal was dissuaded from carrying out the mission by Ninurta in Sumerian texts. According to the Bible, Abraham pleaded with one of the 3 angels who visited him to spare Sodom if 10 righteous ones could be found there. A mob seeking to sodomize 2 angels sent to Sodom to verify whether the city should be spared attacked them that evening. They agreed to delay the upheaval so Lot's family could escape to the mountains as soon as possible. A little before dawn, Era, emulating Ishum, uprooted the cities, making them desolate. He wiped out Sodom, Gomorrah, and 3 other cities in the disobedient land. The Bible affirms that as the sun rose over earth, from the skies those cities were upheaval with brimstones and fire that came from Yahweh. Abraham arose at dawn and went to where he had stood with the Lord. As he looked towards Sodom and Gomorrah, he looked in the direction of the plain, and lo, and beheld, like a furnace, steam arose from the ground. Genesis 19:27-28. The Bible says that happened when the annihilator Nergal dropped 5 nuclear devices, annihilating the cities of the plain. After the nuclear holocaust, the law of unintended consequences was demonstrated on a catastrophic scale. The death of Sumer itself was caused by a poisonous airborne nuclear cloud carried eastward by unexpected winds. Evil wind. A storm, the evil wind, tossed the skies, causing the cities to become desolate, causing houses to become desolate, causing sheepfolds to be empty, causing Sumer's waters to be bitter, its cultivated fields to grow weeds. So every text from that time described what had happened. The texts claim that a catastrophe erupted on Sumerian soil, one unfathomable to man. In the streets an unseen death roamed, letting loose on the road. It cannot be seen when it enters the house. It glides like a snake through the door and blows in like a breeze through the hinge. The highest wall, the thickest wall, can't protect from this evil which terrorizes the world as a ghost. Flooding occurs. Behind doors, those who hide are killed. Those who fled to the rooftops perished there. It was a horrible, gruesome death. Whenever the evil wind reached, the terrified people could not breathe, or their mouths were drenched in blood. Evil wind made the faces pale as the heads writhed in blood. Anu decreed the great storm. From Enlil's heart it came. It was triggered by nuclear devices. From 7 weapons it came in a lightning flash. It came from the plain of the Dead Sea. From the plain of no pity it had come. The gods fled Sumer in panic after learning the evil wind's direction. Various lamentation texts, such as Lamentation over the destruction of Sumer and Ur, list the cities and temples abandoned to the wind, and describe the haste, terror, and grief that each deity felt when they fled, unable to help the people. I was forced to run from my temple like a bird, Inanna lamented. Behind them were standing temples, houses, animal stalls, and all other buildings, but everything that lived be people, animals, or vegetation, was dead. The day when the skies were crushed and the earth was smitten, its face obliterated by the maelstrom. Such were the words written even centuries after the event. An emotional Ningal wrote in a lamentation over the destruction of Ur, "Ur and its people were given over to the wind."
What? Yeah, this is not happening. Yeah, I need a widescreen, I think. Yeah, I need widescreen. Why? Why? Okay, I totally pushed B on that stupid thing. Get out of here. No snipers. Such a scam. Oh, the video ended. It was 3 hours.
In the year 1625, an Italian nobleman named Pietro della Valle went on a tour of the Middle East. Della Valle was a prolific traveller. He journeyed around Asia, North Africa, and even India. He married an Assyrian Christian princess in Damascus, and now the two of them travelled together, journeying by horseback and camel, accompanied by local guides. At this time, travel in this region couldn't have been more dangerous.
Why?
The Ottoman and Persian empires were at war, fighting over who would rule in Baghdad. And meanwhile, local bandits took advantage of the chaos to prey on travellers. In those days, lions even roamed in these hills. Due to these various dangers, Della Valle's guides were constantly on edge. It was June the 18th, 1625, when they spotted a distant group of tribesmen on the horizon. Their guides decided that they might be in danger and began to search for a place to hide. In the distance, they spotted the looming mass of a series of enormous ruins, as Della Valle later wrote in his memoirs.
Being suspicious of some Arabian vagrants or vagabonds, for more security we removed a mile further and took up our station under a little hill near some ruins of buildings, which we saw from far away.
Della Valle's group stayed in those ruins for several nights, while their guides negotiated with the local ruler, asking for safe passage. During the day, under the baking Iraqi sun, Della Valle passed his time by walking among those monumental ruins.
No, I want to disarm them.
Our removal hence being still deferred, I went in the forenoon to take a more diligent view of the ruins of the above said ancient building. What it had been, I could not understand, but I had found it to have been built with very good bricks, most of which were stamped with certain unknown letters which appeared very ancient. I observed that they had been cemented together not with lime, but with bitumen or pitch.
Della Valle was fascinated by the broken fragments of writing that littered the ground of this ruined place. He explored further and wrote down some of the symbols that he saw again and again, stamped into the stones and pieces of clay brick.
Surveying the ruins again, I found on the ground some pieces of black marble, hard and fine, engraven with the same letters as the bricks, which seemed to me to be a kind of seal. Amongst other symbols which I discovered in that short time, two I found in many places. One was like a pyramid, and the other resembled a star of 8 points.
Della Valle and his wife didn't know it, but they had stumbled across the ruins of Ur, a city that had formed the center of one of mankind's first civilizations.
Oh, because
this society was known as Sumer, and it was where so much of the world we know today first began. Eventually, negotiations with the local leader fell apart, and Della Valle's guides no longer felt safe camped out there in the ruins. They departed in the dead of night and fled to safety across the desert. In Della Valle's bags were a few of the clay tablets that he had found scattered around the ruins of Ur. These would be the first examples ever seen in Europe of a language that had been dead and forgotten for thousands of years. All the way home, Della Valle must have turned those tablets over in his hands, gazed at their mysterious ancient symbols. He must have wondered to himself, who had built those enormous mounds of brick and earth, all alone out there in the middle of the desert? What did the symbols on those broken pieces of clay mean? And if such a great city had once stood there, what in all the world could have happened to it? My name's Paul Cooper, and you're listening to the Fall of Civilizations podcast. Each episode, I look at a civilization of the past that rose to glory and then collapsed into the ashes of history. I want to ask, what did they have in common? What led to their fall? And what did it feel like to be a person alive at the time who witnessed the end of their world? In this episode, I want to go back to the very beginning and look at a society that is one of the candidates for the first ever technological human civilization. These are the people of Sumer, who we call the Sumerians. I want to show how, over the course of millennia, the Sumerians would build a society that would form the blueprint for all that followed after. I want to show how they rose to invent writing, mathematics and the wheel, and built the largest cities that humanity had ever seen. And I want to explore what happened to cause their final and devastating collapse. In the highlands of southeastern Turkey, a range of snow-topped limestone peaks rise over 3,000 meters above the flat plains beneath. These are the Taurus Mountains. The mountains of Turkey rise so sharply that rain clouds find it difficult to pass over them.
I actually shot him?
Instead,
oh my God.
These clouds pool in their hollows and valleys and give these hills an exceptionally high rate.
It's just so tragic. That was a pretty good run. That was a pretty good attempt.
In spring and summer, the warm air means that the clouds are even denser.
Can get the snipers
and violent thunderstorms rock these mountains too, echoing off the stones of the valleys. As a result, this is a landscape shaped by water. The steep sides of the Taurus Mountains have been eroded to form streams and waterfalls, while underground rivers have cut into the rock and hollowed out some of the largest caves in Asia. Just as it has shaped the rocks, water has also shaped the beliefs of this region's people. The name of these mountains, Taurus, comes from the Latin word for bull, and the reason for this isn't hard to see. Temples have been unearthed all across these mountains, decorated with terracotta statues of bulls.
Wow.
Since ancient times, the people who lived here worshipped the storm god Teshub. They believed he rode on the back of a bull, perhaps because the sound of the thunderstorms reminded them of the thumping of enormous hooves. Accompanied with the cracking and booming of these thunderstorms, these heavy spring rains drain into streams and join rivers already flowing down from the snowy mountain passes of Armenia. Soon, these small rivers join together and flow down from the mountains and out onto the wide flat plains beneath in two great majestic watercourses that run together in near parallel for nearly 2,000 kilometers. The vast floodplain of these rivers is today the land we call Iraq. In Arabic, this area is called Bilad el-Rafide, the land of the two rivers. And in the West, it has been known since ancient times by its Greek name, combining the words Mesos, or middle, and Potamos, or river. Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers. These two great waterways are known as the Tigris and the Euphrates. For millennia, these rivers have brought life down into the flat floodplain of Iraq. And the source of that life comes from some of the most lifeless things, the rocks of the mountains themselves. Virtually all rocks are held together with tiny flecks of two different materials, called quartz and feldspar. Quartz is a clear, glittering crystal formed from oxygen and silicon, while feldspar is a complex mineral derived from silicon. Together, they make up over 60% of the Earth's crust. And when rivers cut their routes through the mountain gullies and underground streams, their waters wash over the rocks and dissolve their soluble parts. But quartz and feldspar don't dissolve in water, and so these tiny crystals are carried along by the river in a cloud of glittering particles. We call this substance silt. Silt is sometimes known by the more poetic name, rock flour, and its particles are smaller than a grain of sand. But these tiny specks can have an enormous impact. Soil with a high silt content tends to hold water better and promotes air circulation. And for this reason, silty soil forms the perfect habitat for most plants. The rivers Tigris and Euphrates transport vast amounts of silt down into the lowlands of Iraq every year. And as a consequence, this flat stretch of otherwise arid desert has become exceptionally fertile.
Oh my god.
For the history of this region, and the history of all humanity, these tiny particles would prove immensely significant. Other than its rich clay soil, the desert plains of southern Iraq are an inhospitable landscape.
Short-ass arms,
in fact,
man.
this is perhaps the last place you might expect the first human civilizations to arise. For one thing, the climate of this region is extremely hot and dry. Summer temperatures can reach over 52 degrees centigrade, or 126 degrees Fahrenheit. And rainfall is rare, especially in summer. Coupled with the strong winds that blow across these plains, this means that the soil is arid and windswept. And although the seasonal flooding of the rivers brings life to the earth, these floods are also unpredictable. In Egypt, the River Nile flows directly from the Great Lakes of Africa, which act as a stabilizing and regulating force. But the Tigris and Euphrates depend on the amount of rain that fell on the mountains of Turkey, Armenia and Kurdistan, a quantity that varies greatly from year to year. Years of drought can often be followed by years of devastating floods, and during winter, the whole plain is covered with a thick layer of mud. The region of southern Iraq is also poor in natural resources. The land is essentially nothing but a floodplain made of clay and silt. There are no metals to be mined here, and virtually no stone. And because of all these challenges, it took early humans a long time to reach this hostile environment. In the far prehistoric, archaic humans like Homo erectus vied for survival in the upper reaches of the rivers. Archaeologists have found stone axes and other artifacts dating back to nearly 500,000 years ago. But the riverlands of southern Iraq weren't suitable for this hunter-gatherer lifestyle. But about 13,000 years ago, things began to change. The first nomadic hunter-gatherers began to settle down in permanent villages. These early innovators had noticed something interesting. They saw that when they threw away the discarded seeds of edible plants, that same plant would later sprout out of their rubbish dumps. And this gave them an idea. They realized that if you buried plant seeds in the earth, fed them and watered them, more of the same plants would grow. These were some of the first farmers, and once they found a good patch of land, they quite understandably didn't want to move. They soon built houses nearby, and storehouses to keep food through the winter. They banded together into larger communities in order to divide the labor of farming, and to protect their grain should anyone else try to take it. They learned how to take the clay from the ground and shape it into pots. But they were still limited to areas where the rains were plentiful, to the mountains and the foothills. From about the year 6500 BC, these human settlements began to spread. Century by century, millennium by millennium, they worked their way down the courses of the two great rivers and into the inhospitable land of southern Iraq.
Why?
Who these people were, what language they spoke, and what they called themselves, we have no idea. Today, we call this stretch of several thousand years the Ubaid period, named quite arbitrarily after the site where their first artifacts were found. As the Ubaid people moved down the rivers of Iraq, they began to notice other things too. They noticed that date palms grew in some areas of the river, providing them with a rich and delicious source of calories. They soon found out that these too could be cultivated and planted in orchards. And they also noticed that these palms could provide shade for other more fragile plants, allowing them to be grown too beneath the harsh Iraqi sun. And they made another crucial discovery too. They realized that they didn't have to grow their plants only on the banks of the river. With a bit of hard work, they could dig channels that diverted the life-giving water inland. Now they could grow crops just about anywhere, so long as you could dig a canal long enough. And the people of this region would soon become very good at digging canals. Worked properly in this manner, this landscape could be immensely productive. In their fields, the people here grew wheat, millet and sesame, and in gardens beneath the shade of their date palms, they also grew pomegranates, grapes and figs, as well as chickpeas, lentils, leeks, garlic, cucumbers and watercress. But there was one noticeable patch of green in the midst of all this desert. In the south of Iraq, the rivers Tigris and Euphrates branched into deltas and shallow lakes before they meet the ocean, creating an ancient marsh landscape. Here, dense thickets of reeds grow, so tall you can't see over the tops of them, populated with buffalo, wild boar, and marshland birds. Since ancient times, the people here have built their houses out of reeds, binding them together into incredibly strong beams of up to a meter thick, and building large, vaulted houses out of nothing but reeds. And it's in this marshy southern landscape that the greatest Sumerian cities rose. Just as Mesopotamia was watered by two great rivers, its lands were also populated by two great peoples. These were the people of Sumer and the people of Akkad. Over the course of their history, the Sumerians and the Akkadians grew together in such a symbiotic way that it's impossible to tell the story of one without the other. We know a decent amount about the Akkadian people in the north. They spoke a language in the Semitic family, meaning that it's in the same language family as the Aramaic of the Bible, and later Hebrew and Arabic. This language seems to have been indigenous to the region, and it shares grammar and words with many other languages that surrounded it. But the Sumerian people are much more mysterious. In fact, they are such a mystery that they have caused archaeologists
I think I'm going to sign off in like a minute or two.
The Sumerian problem.
Thanks for being here.
Sumerians spoke what we call a language isolate. That is, it has no relation to any of the languages around it, and it's essentially in a language family all of its own. Sumerian was so alien to the region that early scholars who discovered its first texts didn't believe it could be a real language at all. They thought it must have been a kind of code used to communicate in secret. This alone has led some historians to ask whether the Sumerians may have arrived in southern Iraq from somewhere else. The Sumerian culture centered on the sea coast of Iraq's far south, and so some have suggested that they may have arrived by boat. Some backing for this theory may come in the writings of Roman historian Flavius Josephus, who wrote down a Babylonian legend that he heard in the 1st century AD. It relates the story of a half-man, half-fish called Oannes, who walked out of the sea and taught the people of Mesopotamia the secrets of culture.
He brought them the knowledge of letters, sciences, and all kinds of techniques. He also taught them how to found cities, build temples, create laws, and measure plots of land. He revealed to them how to work the land and gather fruits.
After teaching mankind all these secrets, Oannes leaps back into the sea and swims away. It's possible that in this myth, ancient storytellers have preserved some memory of the arrival of the Sumerians, landing en masse by boat, and bringing with them their advanced urban culture. Some have even argued that the Sumerians may have come from as far afield as India. And more evidence for the migration theory seems to come from the words that the Sumerians used for their professions. For more common jobs, the ones that involved manual labor, the Sumerians used old, pre-Sumerian words. Meanwhile, they brought new words with them to describe more sophisticated and urban occupations. For instance, the words for scribe and winemaker are both distinctly Sumerian. But others have proposed a more interesting theory, which does seem to solve some of these contradictions. Although it does seem a little far-fetched, I think it is worth mentioning here. The clue to this theory comes, once again, from mythology. The Sumerian version of history was dominated by a devastating event of apocalyptic proportions. And if you were brought up reading Bible stories, you may find it familiar. The Sumerians believed that in a time long before, in the time of their most distant ancestors, a great flood had washed over the world.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
This
Have a
same
good night,
story
everybody.
would later pass on into the legends of the Babylonian Empire, and from there to the Hebrew poets who wrote the first books of the Bible. For this reason, the story of the flood is perhaps the oldest continuously told story, and it's in this legend that the clue to the origin of the Sumerians might lie. The story of the flood is so striking that many historians with varying degrees of credibility have tried to come up with some historical event that may have inspired it. And history is actually full of great inundations. When the last ice age ended around 10,000 BC, global temperatures rose between 4 to 7 degrees over a period of about 5,000 years. Up until that point, vast ice sheets had covered the land in the north of the planet, reaching as far south as Berlin. But as temperatures rose, these ice caps melted, and their water poured back into the oceans. Global sea levels rose an average of 2.5 centimeters a year, until by the end, the sea had risen an incredible 120 meters, or enough to completely swallow a 30-story building. Around the world, the sea engulfed vast regions of